Our 7 sports team returns to Sydney's Amaroo Park Raceway for round 3 of the Better Breaks AMSCAR Touring Car Series. The Annan Grove Amphitheatre houses Australia's smallest and most difficult racetrack. 1.93 kilometres in length, Amaroo is the supreme car tester. Queensland's Tony Longhurst returns today as the Better Breaks Series leader for the JPS BMW team, but there's not much in it. 2 points behind him in the Alpha is Colin Bond. Then there's the BMW 635s of Charlie O'Brien, Jim Richards and Gary Rogers. The Valvoline Volvo team is here in force this afternoon, and so too are all the regular action attractions. The showroom Group E Invaders, the open-wheeler Formula Fords and Vs, and of course the Goodyear Lasers that'll amaze you. And if you like some good old-fashioned thunder and lightning, we've got the sports sedans, while Batman and the supercar set have returned for their second tarmac attack. Goodyear presents another edition of Championship Motor Racing from Amaroo. We're glad you could join us.
Hello and welcome to our show with a promise of close, exciting racing and record times. In fact, Jim Richards has pole position for today's third round of the Better Breaks AMSCAR Series in lap record time of 53 seconds. But look out for his teammate Tony Longhurst, for Volvo's John Bauer and for Colin Bond in the Alpha. Our program here at Amaroo this afternoon also includes production cars, Goodyear Lasers, the incredible sports and GT cars featuring Bap Romano and Chris Clearahan, and another showdown between the sons of famous names, Brabham and Rooklyn in the Formula Fords, plus a stack of other motorsport features. But we're getting set now for the first heat of the touring cars. Here's Neil Crompton.
Thank you, Wilco. And cars on the grid at the moment for the opening heat of the AMSCAR Touring Car Series here for round 3. Let's take a look at the grid and the way they'll line up for this 10-lap encounter. From pole position, Jim Richards in the BMW, a time of 53 seconds even. Second spot on the grid, John Bauer from Victoria driving the Volvo 5312. The second row of the grid, Colin Bond sharing the second row, of course, with Tony Longhurst, the series leader. He recorded a time of 53.5. On the third row of the grid, Gary Rogers in the BMW with Tony Cavich in the Commodore. The fourth row of the grid, Gary Wilmington in the Jaguar, Brian Callahan in the Commodore. The next row of the grid, Peter Williamson in the Toyota Supra with Ken Matthews. Then we've got Ken Davison, Bob Holden, David Ratcliffe and Kevin Clark. That's the field. Flag raised, ready for a start.
And they're racing. Jimmy Richards gets off quickly and Colin Bond makes a lightning start, but it's going to be John Bauer who will head them up Bitchapave Hill for the first time, with Tony Cavich making a run here on the outside of Tony Longhurst. Bauer and the Valvoline Volvo will take the lead, though, as they drop down into Dunlop Loop for the first time. Bond, a very, very good start there, makes it up into third, and Jim Richards is right on the tail of John Bauer as they head down to Mazda Corner for the first time.
I noticed a vacant spot on the grid there too. I think Gary Wilmington's Jag is missing. Didn't make it for the start.
Had problems with the rear end of the car, has been working on it all morning. Hopefully we'll make it back for the sprint race. Down to Honda Corner, John Bauer and the Valvoline Volvo is your race leader as he stretches it out. Richards sits right on his bumper, then back to Bond, probably a car length then or two back to Tony Longhurst, and they're opening the gap out on Tony Cavich.
Great start from John Bauer, but Richards pushing very hard to look for a gap on the inside. Couldn't do it coming out of the stop corner as they come up towards the line to end lap 1, 9 to go. Bond in third spot, Tony Longhurst, a great start in the 325 BMW. And a little further back, another great scrap between Rogers and Williamson. Bauer this weekend driving the left-hand drive Volvo, the car that ran in last year's Touring Car Championship at the hands of Robbie Francevic. A new engine in the car for this weekend following last weekend's round of the Touring Car title at Surfers Paradise, and certainly back on the pace, Wilco.
Certainly is, and Bauer out to prove that he's a winner while Robbie's away having a weekend off in New Zealand.
Watch Bauer as he covers his tracks into the left-hand corner at Honda. Took a very tight line, but Richards within a car length or two at the back of the Volvo, and Colin Bond a similar gap back to third. There's Bauer.
John Bauer hasn't done too much tin-top racing here at Amaroo Park Raceway. We've seen him in the Mondial here in previous years. And Jimmy Richards and Colin Bond are both Amaroo Masters. They do all the meetings here throughout the year. Besides, of course, the Australian Touring Car Championship. But Bauer at this stage is looking pretty good as he heads up Bitchapave Hill again.
Bauer's the fastest ever man around the Amaroo Park course in the Rolt RT4 open wheeler in an outright time of 44.6 seconds. So he knows how to go around the 1.96 odd kilometres very quickly indeed.
Won't be going quite that quick this afternoon in the Volvo. Top 4 have made a break here. Bauer, Richards, Bond, Longhurst. Fifth place man At 40 yards astern now is Tony Cabbage in the Commodore, followed by Brian Callahan, then Gary Rogers and Peter Williamson.
The man who is feeling the pinch just a little, Colin Bond, has Tony Longhurst right behind him. Longhurst has been making it through the field, been doing it from the back in most of the Touring Car Championship rounds. There's Bondy in the Ignis Alpha, number 75.
Well-matched pair, Bond and Longhurst going at it for third spot on the racetrack.
2 points between them. As we said earlier, in the Better Brakes AMSCAR Touring Car Series, Longhurst 2 in front of Bond, so today's race is critical. They drop into Dunlop Loop. They've been drawing away a little from the fifth place driver on the road, Tony Cabbage, in the yellow Commodore.
The lap record in the Group A cars here at Amaroo Park is held at a time of 53.5 seconds by Jim Richards. We look here at Tony Cabbage in the highest placed Holden Commodore at the moment. 3 drivers went underneath that lap record in practice, Richards, Bow and Bond. And this man here flying the General's flag as high as he can this weekend. Commodores aren't exactly thick on the ground, and back in 5th placing, giving away around about 3 or 4 seconds to Tony Longhurst.
Well, he's been able to distance himself from, whoops, a little bit of stand on it sideways stuff from Tony Cabbage.
This is the car that ran early last year as Alan Grice's car. In fact, it's an old converted Group C car. It was purchased by Ralph Radburn and Tony Cabbage, and car number 29 out of the running. That's Ken Davison in the Mustang. A bit of steam and smoke coming out of the beast. But Cabbage is doing an excellent job. Yellow Pages entry.
Behind Cabbage, I've noticed Gary Rogers in the Bob Jane T-Mart's BMW, so he's been able to keep himself just a little clear of the Victorian Gary Rogers.
Gary's a little bit off the pace this weekend by virtue of the fact that the other BMWs have got the latest homologation components in the cars. That is, and he locks up a brake getting into Honda. That is to say, they have the camshaft and a couple of other cylinder head modifications that Gary's still waiting for. Bits haven't arrived from Germany, so he's giving away about 30 brake horsepower to Richards and company.
Apparently they're not satisfied with the development of the components in Germany. It's not that they're late in arriving, they just have not been dispatched as yet because they're not quite satisfied with their test program.
5 laps down, 5 to go, and here's the leader, John Bow. Top of the hill, very difficult part of the circuit to negotiate. The car gets light over the top and falls away dramatically as you go down through this right-hander, tending to run out of road as you come around this very fast part of the course. And Richards, in the very well-balanced BMW, was ultra quick through here. Watched him in practice yesterday and closes up behind John Bow as they come to the left-hander at Honda. And there's Willow in strife in car 77, the Supra pointing the wrong way, doing a bit of gardening.
2 great scraps going on the track. The one up front here between John Bow and Jim Richards, and right behind them, Colin Bond and Tony Longhurst still going at it nose to tail.
It's really 3 groups of 3. We've got Bow and Richards doing battle for 1st and 2nd. It's Bond and Longhurst 3rd and 4th, and then Cabbage and Rogers for 5th and 6th.
Might be a nice feeling today for Jimmy Richards. Has been feeling the pinch just a little. The homologation program of the Commodore has made it a little difficult for the BMW, and of course the Volvos and Nissans have been running strongly all season. If you want a good dice, what about this one? Bondy in the Ignis Alpha, and young Tony Longhurst in number 25. He keeps on keeping on, does Tony. Saw a great scrap between the Queenslander and Dick Johnson, and of course the New Zealander David Oxton in the touring car round from Surfers last weekend.
Well, loves racing very close, does Tony Longhurst. Knows how to apply the pressure, knows how to force mistakes in other drivers. He won't force too many out of Colin Bond, though, I wouldn't think.
Not around Amaroo Park. The thing you have to admire about Frank Gardner and the JPS BMW team, they're at all the race meetings. They've been at all the Better Brakes Series and, of course, all the touring car rounds. They've got a very, very full season. Cars are always turned out splendidly, and they run strongly.
Tony's time in practice of 53.5 seconds is the quickest that the 325 BMW has ever been around Amaroo Park. Frank Gardner was out here on Wednesday and Thursday putting a lot of miles on the car, and they really seem to have got the development just right on this car. And Bond's V6 Alpha performing very well. They had a bad run, an unlucky run at Amaroo Park in Western Australia a few weeks back. They're back now after missing last weekend's touring car round at Surfers Paradise, and they've put some time back into developing the car and getting it right, and it's very strong around this course.
Well, it's running strong in sprint races, and let's face it, the Better Brakes AMSCAR Series is in fact 2 sprint races and a 20-lapper at each meeting. But how good is the 325 looking for the first round of the Enduro Series here come August? I think it'll probably run everything else into the ground during the course of the race.
Well, as you said before, Mike, Tony still leads the series here with 75 points. So it's a giant killing exercise for him, and he's done it so well all year. Look how he throws that little car over the top of the hill. Where he really tends to wear the rear tyres hard on this car is down in the next right-hand turn when they go down towards Mazda. We've had a couple of great shots this year on 7 Sport as he gets the little BM all crossed up. He punts it very hard through here. Doesn't back off at all. This time he keeps it nice and clean. The lap before it was well and truly sideways.
Sorry, Cole. Sorry, Tony. Exit that turn, head down to the lake. And I think Bondi's got the impression now that Tony is very serious about the points situation in the Better Brakes AMSCAR.
Being tangled up in this dice, they're now lapping at 55 seconds even.
A lap to go, just one.
2 seconds off the pace for these two drivers, Bond and Longhurst, by comparison to yesterday's form. And they both practiced on the same compound of tyre that they're racing today. There were no qualifying tyres used. And here's the leader, John Bowe, still with 2 car lengths over Jim Richards. 3/4 of a lap remaining before Bowe takes a heat of the Better Brakes AMSCAR Touring Car Series. His first appearance in this series for 86.
And good to see the Valvoline Volvo team here in Sydney supporting the Better Brakes AMSCAR Series.
The engine they're using in this car is one that has been built and developed by John Shepherd in Melbourne, an Australian-built Swedish engine, as distinct from the Swedish engine they ran last weekend. So it's now functioning very well as he comes to the stop corner for the last time. Richards, a last-minute attempt, and here's the battle for 3rd and 4th, still yet to be resolved. Bond hanging on grimly. John Bowe lining up for the run to the checkered flag. A big charge from Jim, but he can't get through, and it's John Bowe. Jim Richards in 2nd place. Here's 3rd place. Colin Bond will hang on in the Alpha. 4th placing goes to Tony Longhurst. The gap then back to Tony Cabbage, getting the Commodore sideways for 5th, and Gary Rogers in 6th place. The Castrol scoreboard confirmation of placings. John Bowe the winner from Jim Richards in 2nd place, and 3rd goes to the Alpha driven by Colin Bond.
The direction of Australian motorsport seems certain to change in 1987. For a number of years now, overseas teams have been coming to the James Hardie 1000. And that race has produced a lot of interest in Europe. And in 1987, Australia will have a round of the World Touring Car Championship. Wellington, New Zealand is expected to be the opening round of the FIA World Touring Car title next year. The Nissan Mobile 500 is already New Zealand's major motorsporting happening each season. Peter Brock and Alan Moffat started 1986 with a spectacular win in the Waterfront Classic, despite the presence of the Tom Walkinshaw Rovers and European champion Thomas Lindstrom sharing a factory Volvo with Robbie Francevic. Considerable lobbying has taken place in Paris for Australia to host 2 rounds of the World Championship. The James Hardie 1000 seems the obvious choice as our premier touring car event. But speculation continues as to whether Calder or Surface Paradise will get the nod for the 2nd points race.
Next year, the touring car is for the World Championship, as absolutely sure. As for this moment, I have 2 races in Australian and 1 race in New Zealand, and maybe 1 race in Japan.
That's the bone of contention at the moment, is the costs and the input that we've got to put in and the competitors have got to put in towards funding this thing. And we weren't happy when we were over there about where the money was going, and that's still a point to be finalised yet.
It would seem the majority of competitors, though, would vote number 1 for Bathurst as a World Championship race.
Oh yes, that's for sure. And even the Europeans, Bathurst number 1 before anybody else, even Spa.
Touring car racing has jumped to 2nd only in priority with the FIA, the World Motorsport's controlling body. Formula 1 is still the blue chip category, but the Tourers have surpassed both world endurance sports cars and rallying.
I happen to be, although I work with Formula 1, I'm a saloon car fan, and I've run the series in England for the last 7 years.
With touring cars going international and so many countries now wanting to get involved, what do you see as the ideal circuit for touring cars?
That's a real catch-22, isn't it? It's very difficult to give you an answer on that because it depends on the country and what they got to offer. I mean, in principle, people who are purists don't particularly like street circuits.
Correct.
But then not every country's got the facilities to have permanent circuits where they can plough everything in.
The European contingent of racers should number 7, with rounds at Monza, Italy, Silverstone, England, Spa in Belgium, Anderstorp, Sweden, Hockenheim in Germany, Paul Ricard in France, and Estoril, Portugal, strongly supported. Japan is also likely to see the World Championship Tourers at Mount Fuji. That leaves the James Hardy 1000 on the calendar, and at the right time of year to perhaps host the penultimate round.
In London at the meeting, they indicated that, and we were very forcible on this point, that October was the weekend that we had to have it, that weekend, and nowhere else, and they accept that.
The acceptance of the James Hardy overseas.
Oh, very well. Whenever you pick up a magazine over there or anywhere, on Group A, it's always a photograph of the James Hardy or car at Bathurst.
So in old racing terms, the Hardy might be well first past the post.
Yeah, so the guys from Spa would disagree, but I think, yeah, we believe it's first past the post.
The appearance in Europe this year of Grice, Brock, Moffat, Dixon, Holm and Crichton has done a great deal to stimulate interest in the sport's first ever World Touring Car title. And unlike Formula One, we won't have to wait decades to get a slice of the action. Australia and New Zealand have been in on the ground floor since discussions opened 2 years ago.
On the grid for the Coca-Cola Bottlers Formula B Round 3 here at Amaroo Park, and on pole position we've got number 1 Bernie Henley in the Renmax. Alongside him on the front row, car 14 is Peter Warren. Second row is car 2 Stephen David, and 13 Dennis Gillespie. Third row is car 9 Tim Wood, and 10 Norm Johnston, followed by 22 Norm Grieverson and 12 David Cutts, then Brian Selby and Phil Lewis, Chris Lewis and Frank Kleinig. They're the top 12 in a field of 25 as they roar away from the grid.
And guess who leads them up Bitchapay for the first time? It's going to be Bernie Hanley. Switching to the outside is Stephen David, looking for a run on the outside of Peter Warren as they head up Bitchapay for the first time, where they'll go over the top of Nissan Skyline, and Bernie Hanley's in front, but just look at the traffic swarm behind him. That's where the action will be. All trying to squeeze through this first turn. Bernie's bolted as they exit Dunlop Loop and head down towards Mazda Corner for the first time, but Stephen David getting off to a pretty good start. Started out of position 3. Back behind him, Peter Warren, then Dennis Gillespie, Tim Wood, the Victorian, Norm Johnson, also well positioned. To Honda Corner for the first time. Whoop, brake lock up here. Excuse me.
That's just a little bit of understeer, isn't it?
That was just a touch there from number 16.
Chris Lewis,
well,
out of business.
Chris has straightened all that up. Meanwhile, down at the lake, Bernie Hanley, clear of Stephen David. Then number 14, of course, Peter Warren. Back behind them in car number 9 is Tim Wood, the Victorian. Back in 4th spot, and they head up Bitchapay Hill again. They've completed the first of 10 laps here at Amaroo Park in the Coca-Cola Bottler V Series.
Leader in the series at the moment is Frank Kleinig with 15 points, and he shares that lead with this man here, Bernie Hanley.
Here's a go for...
Oh, and they're all over the track here like Brown's cows. Couldn't pick up the numbers. Yellow flags out. It's at the stop corner, and
they managed to pull those off the race track, all but one. Catch it next time around. Bernie Hanley, meanwhile, goes through Mazda Corner and opening that lead all the time on Stephen David in car number 2. They're banking up behind David, though.
Peter Warren in 3rd place on the racetrack. Then Tim Wood in car number 9. Dennis Gillespie in 13. Car 12 is next, driven by David Cutts. And then car number 10, Norm Johnston.
I was about to say that Stephen David is 3rd in the series with 8 points, and Michael Cars-Cadden with 5 points is 4th. Number 14, Peter Warren, in 2nd spot at the moment. Look at the gap from the leader, Bernie Hanley, back to this battle here with Stephen David now squeezing through on the inside, taking back the 2nd spot in car number 2.
Now they're all banking up behind Peter Warren in car number 14.
Slammed the door well and truly in his face there. I think this is probably one of the healthiest grids we've seen in this very popular form of racing for a long time. There's a lot of entrants out there. Certainly the healthiest grid of open wheelers I've seen for a while.
Yep, full field of 25 face the starter here. But, it's amazing to believe that with so few laps down, Bernie Henley has opened up such a commanding lead already.
To the late corner. And Bernie Hanley, as Gary said, opening the gap over Stephen David.
His qualifying time was 60.04 for Bernie Henley, a full 0.3 of a second ahead of the 2nd fastest man, Peter Warren. Warren now holding down 3rd place. That's him, number 14.
one on a spotter bowler. Number 10, Norm Johnson.
I think that was Chris Lewis again in the blue and yellow car 16. So it's 2 out of 2 for him. Incidentally, the lap record in the Formula V class is held by Frank Kleinig in a time of 59.58. Look at this battle here. Peter Warren through on the inside again. Stephen David back into 3rd spot. This is where it's all happening. Minor points battle.
I like the approach by Warren to a few of the turns on the inside. It's been effective, though.
Tim Wood's looking pretty threatening there in 4th place as well.
Looks keen to go faster, Wood. In fact, if he could get by this pair.
David will have to do this all over again. Pick the right moment and apply the pressure on Peter Warren.
There's Tim Wood, car 9, Geneva entry. Just behind Stephen David, who finished 3rd in last year's series here. Of course, Bernie ultimately trying to take this crown back from Queenslander Ian Simpson, not here this weekend. Bernie finishing 2nd last year. And now look at Stephen David trying to get through on the inside again. He's got away with it once more, but look at Tim Wood. Warren in stripe in the middle. I think Timothy's come through in 2nd spot out of all that. No, he hasn't.
Oh, watch this, though.
See you later.
Thank you.
Peter Warren winds back, I think, giving him the old Westerner slip there on the inside as they come out of Dunlop. Little touching of wheels there that upset the placings.
Never seen a Formula V cross so much track sideways in one hit. Car number 3, Frank Kleinig, black car. 12, David Cutts in the blue entry. Behind him in car 13 is Dennis Gillespie.
Just about to come up on the half distance in this race. 5 laps down for the leader, Bernie Henley. There he goes.
I'll have to swap Bernie after this one. He's too far in front.
And 5 laps to go.
Someone's given Bernie a ginger up. Usually he's back in the pack a little. Once again, Warren comes up on the outside of David and also brings Wood up as well.
Oh, goodness me, had to happen.
Peter Warren getting the short back and sides, disappearing over the hill backwards.
2 of them
Frank
out there.
Kleinig was involved in that in car 3. Stephen David there as well on the right-hand side of screen in car 2.
Kleinig looks undamaged.
Apart from the missing nose cone. Not a pretty sight.
It'll help keep his feet cool anyway. We'll look at that later. I bet a few of them had an anxious moment there, appearing at number 3.
How far can Bernie win this Formula V race by? 2nd place has been inherited by Tim Wood from Victoria.
I'm amazed he survived that incident.
Yeah, and 3rd place is car 12, David Cutts. He's then followed by Dennis Gillespie in 4th in car 13. Then car 25 is Michael Cars-Cadden.
Big effort by Cars-Cadden to get up to 5th place. Came from 13th position on the grid, although some of the opposition, of course, has cancelled itself out.
In one big hit. Well, it's been a bonus day for Bernie. There'll be another 9 points at the end of this exercise for him after the 10 laps.
And another presentation.
And another presentation. All yours, Wilco.
Thank you. Frank Kleinig, of course, who shared the lead coming into this round of the series, was caught up in that trouble on the previous lap and is now at the tail of the field, so he's not going to get any points out of today's effort.
So Bernie really gets 2 bonuses out of this. He picks up the race win and the prize money that goes hand in hand with that from Coca-Cola. But he also gets the points bonus, and he takes his lead up to 24 points, and that's well clear of his nearest rival. And remember, of course, that Stephen David was tangled up in that as well, and he was 3rd in the series, so it looks like Bernie might nail it again.
Bernie Henley, race leader in the Coca-Cola Bottlers Formula V series here this afternoon at Amaroo, heading up Pitcher Pave Hill again.
Victoria in 2nd.
2nd spot, of course, held down by Tim Wood of Victoria. Managed to get out of that problem that 2 or 3 of them had at the top of Skyline. Well, 2 laps ago.
2 lucky escapes, hasn't he?
Yep.
Tim Wood, he survived one on the previous lap when he got shunted wide. Then he became the meat in the sandwich and didn't get eaten.
Tim has yet to score any points in this year's championship, so he'll look forward to a high finishing position in this one. 2nd place should get him 6 points. The battle for 3rd, 4th and 5th, though, is a long way from over as we watch Bernie Henley going down towards the late corner. Well and truly in command of proceedings with about a 7-second gap now over his nearest rival.
2 laps to go, I think, for Bernie Henley. Yes, as they come around again to the start-finish line. Car number 78 has gone off there. Nigel Hook driving a Ranger, well named.
Not touching that, we'll go with a barge pole. He's out of harm's way. Here's the good scrap that we've been following for about 5th spot on the
Greg
road.
McCombie, car number 11. Brian Selby following him through in 6th. And who's that going up wide to the top of the hill? Pulls back inside wisely. Car number 13, it looks like.
Dennis Gillespie.
He must have slipped a few places, Gillespie.
Well, I think he was one of the unfortunate drivers tangled up at the top there before and dropped back a spot or two trying to get through the wreckage.
Car 25, Michael Cars-Cadden also in that group, so it's 4 of them.
Well, Michael's a hard charger.
Somebody else is tagged on at the end of that group as well.
Well, as this bunch goes down to the right-hander at the stop corner, gives you some idea of the lead that Bernie Hanley's got as he comes along the main straight. That is a very healthy gap in Formula V racing. 1 lap now to go for Bernie.
And the familiar number 1 car of Bernie Hanley going through Dunlop Loop.
Certainly a timeless division of racing, the same specification for these cars over a long period of time. It's kept them very evenly matched, and Bernie's proving that you don't have to have the latest in technology to win motor races.
But you do have to have ability. To Honda corner for the final time. And Bernie makes it look quite easy, doesn't he? Mark of a good driver. He's had nothing in his mirrors since the race started. Trees, and that's about all.
And the grass growing.
Yep, coming up to Camalco Wonderlic corner for the final time. And Bernie Hanley comes out and goes on to win this afternoon's round of the Coca-Cola Bottlers Formula V Series here at Amaroo Park Raceway. Second coming up for you now. And, of course, that group still dueling there for 4th and 5th place as they go across the line. And, of course, we had the incident earlier.
And as they came over the top of the hill, this is a bit of what happened. Bernie Hanley was well and truly in command, but it was Frank Kleinig and Stephen David who touched. And in the middle, it was Peter Warren. Kleinig's on the left-hand side of screen in the black car. Stephen David in the red and white car gyrating in the middle of screen. And what happened to Peter Warren, I do not know. He just disappeared completely. So the dust flew and exit 2 or 3 of your leading Formula V contenders. Replay of the action from mid-race in this 3rd round of the Coca-Cola Bottlers Formula V Series. And Bernie once again in car 1, victorious, goes on and continues to lead the series and picks up more of that Coca-Cola prize money. Let's have a look at placings on the Castrol scoreboard. And in the Formula Ford Coca-Cola Bottlers Series, it's Bernie Hanley, the winner, from Tinwood of Victoria in 2nd and Cuts in 3rd in car number 12.
Back at Amaroo Park with the winner of today's round of the Coca-Cola Bottlers Formula V Series, and guess who? Bernie Henley. Congratulations again, and Mike Waller is here from Coke to sash the winner. Bernie's got enough of these sashes, I think, now to paper a wall, and certainly if the sashes don't go round, Mike, I think that he'd have enough trophies as well, because he's the most prolific winner we've seen here at Amaroo. The trophy also from Mike.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Bernie.
Thank you to Coca-Cola for the support.
Bernie, that was about the most comfortable win we've ever seen you score, and we've seen you score plenty.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, sometimes this happens, especially when one gets a little bit of roast in the before the race.
Well, a few of the other guys got tangled up mid-race on the top of the hill there. You would have seen them next lap round. You were so far in front you wouldn't have seen the incident, but your car seems to be going so much better. Have you done something to it?
No, it's not the car. The car is actually, a matter of fact, I would think we didn't get under the minute, which we did last time. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a matter of they were fighting against each other and holding each other back. And I was aware of that already yesterday in practice, because they treated practice yesterday like a race. And so I would imagine it was very fiercely contested for 2nd place.
Sure was. OK, Bernie, thanks a lot. Great win now. That put you a long way ahead in the series. OK, Bernie Henley, winner of today's round of the Coca-Cola's race. And right now, Neil Crompton.
Thanks, Wilco. Well, the man of the moment in Australian motor racing at the moment is Bap Romano, and he's back at Amaroo today to run this fascinating 500 horsepower Kadicha. And Bap, I'm sure, a fairly daunting task around here.
Sure is, Neil. It's not built for this type of circuit, and the engine is mainly for top speed type thing. whereas the Chevy-type engines with that low-down torque have got a lot more grunt out of the corners, where this mainly relies on revs and top-end speed mainly. So they get out of the corners a little bit quicker than what we do.
Now, a car that's designed for Le Mans, potentially, running here at a 1.9 kilometre circuit, I should think that's a very hard thing to develop the car for, trying to set it up right.
Yes, that's right, Neil, but you know, we'll do okay. We're managing at the moment, but it's too tight and twisty for this motor car, but we'll just do our best under the circumstances anyway.
Now, unfortunately, your plans to run this car in the WEC round in Australia, which is the World Endurance Championship, have fallen through because of the fact that there's no longer going to be a round here. How much time and money has been spent on what has become a wasted exercise?
Oh, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, Neil. It's fairly heartbreaking, really, because the only way to do it properly, I suppose, is to go overseas, but I just haven't got that sort of money, and I don't think most Australians have. It would have been a golden opportunity to race against the big boys in our own country. But the car is still regarded as the fastest Group C2 car in the world, and you know, to get the car the way we want it at the moment, you've still got to spend about $50,000 or $80,000 odd dollars, and I just haven't got that ambition at the moment to go and spend that sort of money. For what purpose?
On the other side of the coin, your Mondial racing, your Australian Formula One's been going brilliantly, particularly, of course, back in Adelaide and Perth, where there were really some sparks flying.
Yes, I worked pretty hard there, actually, and especially the last race in Perth, because I think Peter's a very, very professional driver. He does everything, he approaches everything at 100%. And, well, we only just won that race the last lap in the last corner.
And how are your plans progressing for the Formula One drive in Adelaide later in the year?
Well, Neil, I was talking to Ken Tyrrell last Thursday, and I have to have a meeting with CAMS, hopefully next Tuesday or Wednesday, to discuss what we are doing. Because they're ready on their end and I'm ready from my end, but I need 100% support from our Australian body, because if I don't, well, we just won't get the licence. But at the present time, if we win the Australian Gold Star, well, hopefully I can. Well, I couldn't see any problems. Actually, I hope so. See how we go.
Well, thanks, Mac. We'll look forward with great anticipation to seeing how you go when we return after this break on 7 and watch the Forsyth and Romano Sports and GT Challenge.
Motor Racing, the book of the year. Touring car action with Richards, Johnson, Brock and Jones. The thunder of the Lola, Kaditcha and Romano sports cars. The excitement of Bathurst with the Jaguars, Commodores, Mustangs, BMWs, Alphas and the Volvo Turbo. Plus Formula One and the Australian Grand Prix with Prost, Senna, Lauda, Rosberg, the Ferraris and Brabhams. And full championship race results. It's all in Motor Racing, the book of the year, out now.
At Amaroo Park, these are the cars for the Forsyth and Romano Sports and GT Challenge. That car number 11 is Jeff Harris from the Central Coast of New South Wales in a JWS Chev. There is some exotic machinery on the track for this, and we've got a total of 6 starters, but the 6 of them will provide a ton of action. On the front row of a very spread grid, we've got Keys Coppenol. That was Jeff Mundy, in fact, in that car. Also a JWS Chev, number 9. I don't see Keys Coppenol at all. Looks like he's not going to make the grid, so we're reduced to a field of 5. So Mundy has the front row on his own. Then back behind him, we've got Brian Thompson in car 17, the Mercedes. Car 11, Jeff Harris, the JWS Chev. And then the back markers in this event are Chris Clearahan in the Kaditcha and Map Romano in the Romano Cosworth.
Basically a handicap start, and they're racing. Here are your back markers. And, of course, wait for them to come into view now as they come through the top turn, now onto the straight. Chris Clearahan getting the break over Bap Romano. We'll see how quickly they can pick up the front runners as they drop into Dunlop Loop for the first time. There's Jeff Harris going through, Brian Thompson in the not-so-standard Merc.
Harris is running the V6 Chev. Oh, and Romano in terrible trouble here. The car's gone in at the top of the Dunlop Loop, taken the front right off the car. And this is quite a serious incident. We heard something in the background as the cars went to the top, bearing in mind that Romano was in front of Clearahan when they went across the top.
So Bap Romano has gone off into the entrance of Dunlop Loop. Cars, I think, may even be flagged. We'll wait and see as they come over the top of Bitchapave.
Well, there should be a double yellow flag out, which there is, a wave flag indicating the problem that has occurred there. It's just on the outside of this part of the course. You can see the dirt there. And there is Bapramano's Kadicha.
Well, he's gone straight ahead there, coming into the Dunlop Loop area and hit that retaining wall, the tyre retaining wall, with unbelievable force.
That's certainly...
Well, the other thing is I'm just wondering where Clearahan is, because obviously our attention's been taken away from the action, but no, he is circulating as Brian Thompson does battle for the lead here with Jeff Harris in the V6 powered Chev.
And Clearahan closing on this pair very rapidly.
Thompson going through in car 17, and the Benz now leads this.
There's Clearahan just coming into view.
They head up Bitchapave Hill again. Flags will still be waving over this part of the course, completely through Dunlop Loop.
The man that left the starting grid in what effectively was pole position, I guess, was Jeff Munday, and he's in trouble in his Chev-powered JWS. It's just coasting to a stop. So this is the motor race. Clearahan in the V8 Chev-powered Kadicha, the car that won the Australian Sports Car Championship in the hands of Peter Hopwood, now getting power to the ground and sneaking through into what should be second place. Harris having his first run this weekend in car number 11 in the All-Australian colours of gold, green and white.
There's Clearahan going through once again onto the start-finishing straight, tailing Brian Thompson in the Mercedes.
Flags being shown to the drivers at the moment to indicate that there's tender vehicles on the circuit. Thompson covering his ground at the moment. It's flame-throwing Mercedes-Benz that leads this event. Clearahan catching up in no uncertain terms, bearing in mind that he came away from the right-hand late corner, giving almost, I guess, a quarter of a lap away to the pole-sitting drivers, and he's caught up very quickly indeed.
Very towy indeed. Clearahan's car comes out.
Both of these cars with 500-plus brake horsepower, requiring real skill to drive quickly around this tight circuit where there's no room for error, as you can see. This time through, there'll be one lap to go.
Big chance coming up for Clearahan, either on the outside here.
Man in third place, Jeff Harris, in this Chev-powered JWS, was a bit unhappy this morning because they didn't have the right gearbox adapted to the engine. They'll have that right for the next meeting. The car shows a lot of promise, and you can see that he's still tagging Clearahan pretty well here as they go through the Dunlop Loop.
Move down towards Mazda corner. Clearahan a little closer this time to Brian Thompson. Thompson using all of the racetrack, and his car in a straight line is really something. Clearahan has one shot at this down the outside. It's not really for a 5-lap sprint a risk you need to take here at Amaroo. Thompson a little sideways. Clearahan comes up. Is he going to go for it? Yes, he is. Last corner comes up. Clearahan pushing, nudging. The two of them almost connect, and they come out, and Clearahan will go across the line.
And Jeff Harris managed to come up for second place in car 11, and Brian Thompson ultimately finishing in third place. So some real biffo coming through the last turn, and Clearahan the victor. On the Castrol scoreboard, let's check those placings. Chris Clearahan in the Kadicha, the winner. From second place, car 11, Jeff Harris in the JWS Chev, and third place to Brian Thompson in car number 17.
Welcome back to Amaroo Park as we take a look at one of the leading contenders for today's round of the Coca-Cola Bottlers Formula Ford race, coming up later on the program. The driver's name is Warwick Rooklin, better known, of course, for his blue water exploits. Having a father who sailed maxi yachts with outstanding success, it was only natural that Warwick Rooklin should find his sea legs almost before he could walk. As a youngster, he made a name for himself in 12-foot skiffs, and it wasn't long before he was crewing for Father Jack in the Sydney Hobart Classics. In '76, Jack Rooklin won the race with Ballyhoo, while Warwick, then aged 19, skippered the old 57-foot Apollo into second place. Father and son sailed together aboard the new 75-foot Apollo in '82 and were pipped on the line by 7 seconds by the rival maxi Condor of Bermuda. It was the closest finish in the history of the Hobart race. 1982 was also the year that Warwick Rooklin made his first and successful foray into motor racing. And Warwick, I understand that Dick Johnson can take some of the credit for that.
Yeah, well, he can a bit of a blame, you know. He had a service station where I was working in Queensland, and I started talking to him, got interested, and he told me to get into go-karts, because he was driving sprint karts himself then. And so I started that way.
And then you moved on to the Formula Fords, and you had a very successful season here at Amaroo.
Yeah, well, that was my first full year of motor racing, and I was runner-up in the Coca-Cola Series. So, you know, I was pretty happy with that, and I got the Australian Racing Drivers Most Improved Driver of the Year, so yeah, it was a pretty good year for me.
You then had a big wipeout at Winton. Is that what persuaded you to give it away?
No, it was just a coincidence, actually. It was a bit of bad luck, but I was planning to give it up for a while because I was going to America and try to do a bit of racing over there, but nothing eventuated. And so I just came back and just started yachting again.
Brooklyn turned his energies back to business. He's a consultant for Hood Sailmakers and back to yacht racing with continued success. He's won the Sydney to Brisbane race 3 times and carried our Channel 7 camera to Hobart aboard Apollo in '84. And then on Boxing Day 5 months ago, he again took the helm and drove Apollo out the heads and headed south in the AWA Hobart Classic. And this time he was destined for the big prize. Apollo cleared out to take line honours in easy fashion from Windward Passage and Ragamuffin. But no sooner was Warwick Brooklyn back on dry land than he was again bitten by the motor racing bug. And he now leads the National Motorcraft Formula Ford Driver to Europe Series, winning the opening round in South Australia and being placed at both Sandown and Surfers Paradise.
It's very exciting, you know. I love the motor racing. It's really what I'd like to do now. And I've been, you know, yachting for a long time, and I just sort of ran out of bit of enthusiasm for it. You know, I still love it, but the motor racing is the thing that I really do love now. It's great.
Cars or boats, Warwick Brooklyn is obviously a thinker behind the wheel, talented and determined, a proven winner in pro sport, a shrewd assessor of the opposition, so he knows it won't be all plain sailing here at Amaroo this afternoon. Here's Mike Raymond.
Thank you, Gary Wilkinson. Well, we have dramas down in Dunlop Loop following the accident where Bap Romano in the Khadija has gone off the circuit in the previous event. As you can see, the crash crews are there on the scene trying to cut Romano out of the car. There's not much up the front of the car, and of course he's gone into the earth bank there very, very heavily indeed. But he has the best of possible attention, as all the track marshals and the ARDC stewards here, plus of course the ambulance. So bad luck indeed for Bap Romano, taking a very heavy shunt here at Amaroo Park Raceway this afternoon. We'll take a break and then return for more live action from Amaroo Park.
Back at Amaroo Park, the program on hold here, and the big crowd expectant as they await further developments following the accident in the previous event with Bap Romano trapped in the wreckage of his Romano Cosworth up in the Dunlop Loop, and we'll keep you informed of what's happening there as we learn from officials of the ARDC that are on hand endeavouring to release Romano from the wreckage of the car at this stage. As I said, that has put a hold on the rest of the program, and a lot of people anxiously awaiting news of Bap Romano, because he's a very, very popular figure with the motor racing crowds, not just here at Amaroo, but right round Australia. So whilst we await some further news from that part of the track, we might take a look at one of the other, in fact, the other big motorsport event taking place in the world this weekend, and of course that's the Indianapolis 500. Here's Mike Raymond.
For 69 years, the Indianapolis 500 has been America's richest, best attended and costliest race in terms of lives lost in the pursuit of sporting glory. Since 1911, when Ray Haroon averaged almost 75 miles an hour for the 500-mile race, speeds at Indy have increased at such a rate, even today's million-dollar turbo jockeys are unsure whether it's a case of technology gone haywire.
Well, we don't need 215. You know, we do need 200 for the spectators. We don't need 215, and you know, if they're going to slow them down, they just need to slow them down in a corner, not in a, you know, not in a straightaway.
It's very difficult for the average person to tell how fast the car is going when it runs by you. So, you know, what we need is close racing and not fast racing.
When it comes to the design and manufacture of a race car, money is no object. Traveling at speeds in excess of 200 miles per hour, the cars are built to withstand incredible forces, including the ever-present possibility of a crash. The idea in an accident is to save the driver. The cars purposely are designed to break apart in a manner that will give the driver the best chance of survival. However, it has not been possible to predict with any great precision which parts of the chassis are likely to fail first in different kinds of crashes. Now, Daniel Metz and Scott Burns, both engineering professors at the University of Illinois, are using computers to simulate the forces that act on the car when something goes wrong, such as the twisting that would occur if a wheel were lost.
When we apply that twist, we exaggerate the deformation so that we can see, relatively speaking, along the length of the racing car, where the car is twisting and by how much of an angle. If we can study that, we can have some idea of, relatively speaking, where the car is stiff and where the car is flexible.
The computer model was derived from the actual chassis of the race car that finished third in the 1985 Indy 500. With tracings from 22 different templates fed into the computer, it then is possible to build up the precision scale model. When the model is subjected to the known forces of a crash, it quickly displays in multiple colors the hot spots of stress and where failure is likely to occur first.
We can describe the physical contours of the object that we're trying to model. We can build those contours up quickly into an object. We can apply a surface to the object. We can load that surface, and then we can see where the stresses that result from that loading actually occur. And we can do that, at least in theory, in a matter of days instead of a matter of years.
Materials testing is necessary to validate the computer predictions, but Metz already is willing to bet on the computer's accuracy.
I can see already that our simple models predict a location for failure, which is not the same as saying when a failure will occur, at pretty much the same locations where failure actually does occur on real cars.
The 2.5-mile oval is packed to capacity on race day as 350,000 Americans sample the atmosphere and danger that is uniquely Indy. The build-up starts on the first day of May as cars begin practice. 2 weekends of qualifying follow, usually with 200,000 spectators in the grandstands on each of the 4 days. Then the 33-car field is decided. Strangely, Indy has few modern-day heroes. The old brigade of A.J. Foyt, Mario Andretti and Al Unser are the sentimental favourites. They might be from another era, but they're also the fastest grandfathers on Earth.
It's a very hard, competitive group this year and every year. So I think that as long as you're still in that status, you're not over the hill.
We have as good a shot at the race as anyone, and I have a good team behind me, and I know I can get the job done if the car works, so why not?
I don't think age has anything to do with it, as long as you're physically fit and as long as your timing and coordination and everything else is up at a peak. You can compete sometimes against the young kids in a different manner perhaps than they do. They sometimes get a little braver, but maybe a little experience and sense can overcome that.
Californian Rick Mears will pace the field for today's 70th edition of the 500 after turning the famed Brickyard at 217 miles an hour in the yellow Roger Penske entry. Last year's winner, Danny Sullivan, starts from the middle of the front row, while Mario Andretti's son, Michael, is the 3rd fastest qualifier.
I think we have a real legitimate shot at winning a race, but you never know.
The final practice hit-out for drivers almost ended in tragedy on Thursday when Dennis Firestone had a tyre blowout. His machine cannoned off the outer wall and into the pit entrance, clipping an unsuspecting George Snyder and triggering off quite a wreck. Racing luck has a lot to do with the outcome of the Indy 500. Pole sitter Mears survived this horrifying prang in Canada a few years ago, and he more than most can put this race into its correct perspective.
It's got to be your day. All the elements are working in your favor, you know, and there's always a lot of racing luck involved in this race for 500 miles. And it's just got to be one of those days that, you know, that he's on your side.
And while Rick Mears will control the pace at Indy, the World 600 Stock Car Classic at Charlotte, North Carolina today will see Daytona 500 winner Jeff Bodine at the head of the pack after a scorcher in qualifying.
It's really a fine line. You have to try to go as fast as you can, but you know if you overdrive it and slip, you're going to lose 2 or 3 tenths of a second, and that could be from 1st to 10th place. So as hard as you can go, but don't make that mistake.
Rick Wilson should have taken Bodine's advice. The 3rd driver on the track, he suddenly lost it between turns 1 and 2. Car number 4 was into the wall and through for the day. Tim Richmond fared much better, ripping off 4 laps in his Chevy at an average speed of 164.431 miles an hour, easily the best among the early qualifiers. And as the shadows lengthened, it became evident that only one man would challenge, Daytona champion Bodine. His first lap exceeded 166. The handling was perfect. He knew he had a real shot, but good enough to beat Richmond, he wasn't sure.
No, I didn't. I really didn't know. I tried to look at the scoreboard. I tried to look at the people's reactions. They were cheering, but that doesn't always mean anything. But when I came around and drove down the pits, everyone had the number 1 sign up. That's when the heart stopped beating.
And welcome back to this not very happy scene here at Amaroo Park. As you can see, Bap Romano's car in the background, having gone into the embankment here at the Dunlop Loop in the previous race, the Forsyth and Romano Sports and GT Challenge. Chris Clearahan, you were the driver who was immediately behind Bap when the cars came over the top of the hill. How did you see it?
Well, as you know, we're both in a hurry and we're both very psyched up, and the problem, where I saw the problem, we're both going just so quick on cold tyres. We came over at such a rate there was just no way we're going to get around the corner, and unfortunately Bat was trying a little bit harder than I was, and came straight across the corner and couldn't turn. Tried to turn, but because of cold tyres the car just went straight ahead and veered off the circuit.
We raced up here in our 7 Sport Land Cruiser and brought you up quickly because of your experience with these types of cars and the way they're built. How does the situation look at the moment?
Well, the situation at the moment is, unfortunately, Bap's trapped in the car, and the problem that he's facing at the moment is that the belt is so tightly wrapped around his chest, and he's obviously got internal problems, and trying to release the belt, I've tried on a couple of occasions, and it's just jarred tight, and because of the way his legs are pushed up into his stomach, unfortunately, I'm unable to get the belt open, but...
he is conscious and he's okay.
He's conscious. I've been talking to him and everything's fine that way. It's just he's got problems with his ankle and a few internal problems. And what we've got to do is stretch the car out, relieve the pressure off his legs, and then hopefully he'll be able to sit a little bit better in the car, and we'll be able to undo the buckles. But unfortunately, the way the car's wrapped around him at this time, we're unable to get in there with knives and screwdrivers and pliers, which I've been trying to do to release the belt. It's just jarred tight at the moment.
Well, I'd rather you go back and do something more important than talk to me. And also with me is the meeting director, Ivan Stibbard. And Ivan, how do you see it at the moment?
Well, first of all, you know, the reason why it took so long to get started, we had to make sure the doctors and the ambulance officers were satisfied that he was under control before the crash crew could work on the car. And as you heard Chris say, it is an unusual one. The seatbelt's jammed right round him, and they've got to separate the car now before they can cut the belt.
And what about the meeting?
Well, we'll probably... yeah, that's a point. I haven't thought about that at the moment. We'll probably cancel out the sports car race to try and make a bit of time, and I'll have a look at it and see how much further down the track we go here.
Well, thanks, Ivan. I'll let you get back to it. Not a very pleasant scene down here. I don't like talking about these sorts of things. On a brighter note, let's take a look at the way the Aussies have been shaping up this year in Europe.
Coming in for the start of the first round of the European Touring Car Championship, and John Louis Schlesser in the Rover heads down the front straight, and tucking right in behind him is Anders Olofsson. Right behind them, Johnny Cicotto, and Alan Grice of Australia has made it up to 4th, so he holds his position. Tom Walkingshaw is the next one through, and Peter Brock dropping 1 spot already, goes back to 8th. They move onto the back straight. Alan Grice running a very solid 4th. The Rovers, then Peter Brock in car number 5 as they go down towards the Parabolica. Traffic congestion here, upside down, one of the Corollas as they work down towards Campari. There's the gap. Schlesser, the race leader. Alan Grice already up into 2nd spot, and then being followed by Anders Olofsson in car number 2. The second of the Volvos with Johnny Cicotto at the wheel, and front straightaway on lap 3, Alan Grice goes through to take over the lead in the unsponsored Commodore, number 27. Just look him work at the wheel. Through the chicane, Gricey's in front as they work their way down to the back straight. Schlesser still running a very solid 2nd. Back in 3rd place is Anders Olofsson. The gap between 1st and 2nd as Australia's Alan Grice leads the opening round of the European Championship onto the back straight. Peter Brock up now into 6 spots in the Mobile Commodore. Car number 5 staying in touch with the Rovers. Towards the front straight again, Alan Grice still with the Volvo staying in touch. Johnny Cicotto, and problems already for Peter Brock on lap number 6, out of the opening round. And big problems too. The crew take it easy because Brock is not going to win this race.
The axle shaft broke, left-hand rear axle shaft, and it's actually split right the way down the middle. It's a problem that we haven't had for about 5 years. Unusual.
Can you put it down to anything at all? Just bad luck?
I think so, yeah. Just bad luck.
Peter Brock is out, but Alan Grice with his hands full at the moment. Car number 27 moving onto the back straight and being tailgated by 3 Rovers. He's dropped out of the lead. It's been taken by Cicotto. And here's Grice under pressure from Schlesser, who comes back on the outside. Grice now goes back to third. In 4th place is Tom Walkingshaw. So the Commodore driver still has it all to do. And the traffic congestion, it's very, very high indeed. The front straightaway, the race leader, Johnny Cicotto of Venezuela in Volvo number 1, streaking away from the opposition. An unscheduled pit stop. Alan Grice, the car is in the pits. Graham Bailey, the co-driver, is sitting in the car. Fuel pump problems for Grice, but he's underway, and Alan Grice drops 2 minutes in the pits.
Early in the piece, I lost some fuel pressure, and I went onto the reserve pump, and that overcame the problem up until just then. Tom got a bit balked behind the car, and I passed him down straight over the back. As soon as I got in front of him again on the way out of a corner, nobody home. Suddenly, it just started to surge again.
The pit stop for the race leader. Into the pits comes Johnny Cicotto. Has quite a handy build-up. A pretty ordinary-looking pit stop. They're taking their time. Thomas Lindstrom in the car, trying to fire the engine. The car will not start. Mechanics in the trunk. What a time to holler for a marshal. The battery is out and they're dropping valuable time. They work their way through the Parabolica. Rovers 1, 2 and 3 in the opening round of the European Championship. Tom Walkingshaw, car number 8, the man who's going for a hat-trick in this race as he works his way onto the back straight and into the pits. Watch the Bastos boys in action, the fastest crew in European Touring Car Championship racing. Win Percy goes into the car, Walkingshaw assists with the belts, and they will go back out running in second spot behind Schlesser. A quick pit stop for the TWR boys, and out goes Win Percy. Well, Tom, looking pretty good for a 1-2-3, a good way to start the season.
Well, I think it's far too early yet, so why don't you come back after the race?
But I'm the eternal optimist.
Yeah, I'm the racing driver.
Yeah, I know, there is a difference, isn't there? The early laps of the race looked a little frantic.
Yeah, it was good fun. We knew it was going to be that way. And I just hung back to let everybody settle down before I started trying to figure a way past them.
I was going to say, do you think the Australians have learned something about ETC traffic racing by now?
Well, not a lot, you know. I think if Gracie had worked with us, we could have got up in the Volvo, but he's more interested in racing for second. He seemed to have forgotten that first place is one in front of that.
Troubles for Graham Bailey in car number 27, the Alan Grice entry. Stuck in the sandpit, the car is underway again, but they have dropped about 10 laps. And Graham Bailey, disappointed, returns to the pits. The race continues. The Rovers still leading. Win Percy at the wheel of the number 8 car. A little front end damage as he comes through the chicane, but he's opening the gap all the time on Jeff Allen. Rovers 1, Rovers 2 for the opening round. In third place, Dieter Quester in the number 11 BMW, doing a great job as he makes his way onto the back straight. And perhaps the 4th place driver, Winnie Voigt in the BMW 325, from last to 4th in the field. 5th place goes to Danny Snowbeck in the 190 Mercedes. What a beautiful looking car. It's noisy, but it's fast. 5th outright at this stage. Laps drawing out. Across the checkered flag, Win Percy takes round 1 here at Monza. 2nd place goes to Jeff Allen in the 2nd Rover, and 3rd to Dieter Quester in the BMW. So, first blood in the ETC Championship goes to Rover. Not the best of days for Volvo and Commodore, but the Aussie General has shown enough firepower to indicate it won't be long before Europe is toppled by some down under thunder. Here's how they finished. First place goes to Walkingshaw and Percy in the Rover. 2nd to Allam and Hoosen in the 2nd Bastos car, and 3rd to Quester and Rensing in the BMW 635.
Back at Amaroo Park, and that is what is left of Matt Romano's Romano Cosworth car. Romano has been removed from the car and placed in the ambulance, and the ambulance is just now leaving the circuit on its way to hospital. We'll have a further report on Romano's condition as soon as possible. It's going to take them some little time still to clear away the wreckage of the car and get the track cleared before the program can proceed here at Amaroo. So why don't we return to our coverage of the European Championships.
Round 2 of the European Touring Car Championship saw the leading teams leave the Monza mist across the channel, and
and sample the spring chill of England. London certainly has all the tourist attractions, including a monument you can set your watch to. People are friendly, afternoon mum, and rarely tell you to go fly a kite. The loyalty of all motorsports devotees was sorely tested last weekend at Donington Park in the Midlands. The mercury dropped through the floor of the popular course near Nottingham and nearby Sherwood Forest. Once again, Peter Brock, Alan Moffat, Alan Grice and Graham Bailey were on hand with their Commodores and running strongly against the Rovers, Volvos, BMWs and Fords.
I believe it will be a battle of tyres and brakes, and I believe we've got both those areas covered very nicely.
Very hard to warm anything up. You know, normally we run diff pumps and coolers all the time on our diffs in Australia. And here we're not having to go for the pump for probably 15 laps because it takes that long for the diff to get hot enough. But there again, we're not as badly affected. Nearly everybody who runs on radial tyres, we're running on a conventional bias Yokohama tyre, and they warm up much quicker than the radials. So the opening laps at Monza, it was noticeable that our car came to temperature quicker, and it'll probably the same thing will happen here. I think that my tyres will come to temperature quicker than the others.
Donington Park has always been recognised as a fast and tough circuit. It was lengthened only recently to 4.2 kilometres, and not everyone appreciated the changes.
Before, I like very much this circuit. It was a bit small, but the new part is too slow.
It'll be very hard on the cars, brakes, tyres, drivers, so...
It's not the Donington I thought it would be with the new chicane and the two hairpins effectively. So it doesn't really suit us, I think, as much as I thought it would.
I just go to drive today to give the car in the best position after 60 laps. That's the most important thing.
Practice for the 500-kilometre championship race produced every possible weather combination. John Louis Schlesser was quick in the Bastos Rover. So too was Tom Walkingshaw until he beached the second Vitesse while being handed by the Volvos.
When we came in on Thursday for unofficial testing, we were immediately the quickest then, but they've caught us up now.
When the curtain came down on practice, the top 10 looked something like this. Pole position went to Venezuelan Johnny Cicotto in the Nordica Volvo. From 2, Frenchman John Louis Schlesser in the Bastos Rover. Position 3, Sydney's Alan Grice in the Chickadee Commodore. 4, Tom Walkingshaw in the second of the Rovers. From 5, Sweden's Anders Olofsson in the Nordica Volvo. 6, the first of the BMWs with Italy's Roberto Ravaglia at the wheel. From 7, the mobile dealer team Commodore of Peter Brock. Position 8, the Ford Sierra Turbo of German Harold Gross. From 9, Siggy Muller in the Eggenberger Sierra. And position 10, England's Steve Soper in the second of the Eggenberger Fords. Round 2 of the European Touring Car Championship from Donington Park. John Louis Schlesser going through to take over the lead, and a brilliant start by Tom Walkingshaw. That moves him to second, and third is Alan Grice. Next back is Cicotto, followed by Olofsson. And already in this first half lap of the race, the two Rovers, driven by John Louis Schlesser and Tom Walkingshaw, are beginning to run away from Alan Grice and, of course, Cicotto. Brock up to 6th at this stage of the event. 42 starters for round 2 here at Donington this afternoon. Rovers first and second, Grice making up a little ground as he goes through that corner, and Peter Brock now makes it up to 4th, so he's come from 7th to 4th and looking menacing at this stage of the race. A good showing in qualifying also by the Eggenberger Ford Sierra Turbos of Muller. Getting up to 9th in the field so far, and the traffic starting to close up as they come off the loop. And Brock has closed right up behind the Rovers at this stage of the race. Alan Grice making a bid for victory. Goes through to take over the lead from Schlesser. Walkingshaw now moves into 3rd place in the race, and Peter Brock makes it to 4th. The rain arrived almost on cue for Peter Brock in car number 5. Tyre problems, but even more problems for Alan Grice, dropping a little off the pace. And Peter Brock has now gone through to take over the lead in car number 5. The Aussie Challenger Donington is certainly working. Car number 11, the first of the BMWs going through. Roberto Ravaglia also well positioned in the field, but at this stage, Brock, with it sideways, in command of second round of the ETC. Into the pits. A lightning fast pit stop here for Peter Brock. Change of tyres, the track is very wet indeed. Engages the clutch, and Brocky goes back out, running in second. The Volvo driven, of course, car number 2 by Anders Olofsson. Well placed throughout the race. And now the pit stop for Alan Grice in 27. Was the race leader, has dropped back to 3rd. Graham Bailey goes in. Grice well positioned. must be delighted. At least he's lasted the first half of the race. And Alan Grice, looking good. Maybe a win coming up for Australia.
We're not used to these sort of conditions, but, you know, the car is very strong. There is not one thing wrong with it, and it's looking pretty good, really.
The race leader coming in. Tom Walkingshaw, car number 8. Walkingshaw will climb out. Win Percy will take over. This is the combination that won the opening round at Monza only a fortnight ago. The crew go about their business very quickly indeed. Walkingshaw is out, gives the instructions to Percy, and he's underway and retains the lead. Win Percy, car number 8, leading at this stage as they work over the back part of the course. Peter Brock, car number 5, coming back from that pit stop, still looking for 3rd place in the race and being trailed there by Danny Snowbeck in the Mercedes. Brock coming in, Alan Moffat at the ready, and Moffat will finally get a drive in an ECC championship round. Problems last start for Moffat, didn't actually get to race. Moffat being buckled into the car's ready to go, and Brock should be happy with that stop.
Oh, yes. I mean, early on, we caught up past Tom and the guys. In fact, I spent most of the time there catching up the Rovers. We seem to have the legs on the Volvos here, and we seem to have the legs on the Sierras and the BMs and what have you. So it was very, very encouraging. What we haven't got right is we've sort of zigged and we should have zagged in terms of tyre choice.
The 4 conditions change. Danny Snowbeck, more traction in the sandpit, but he rejoins the race. One stranded in there being a BMW. Uh-oh, problems here for Gerhard Berger in the number 10 car, the front end almost falling out of the car, and he's on his way to the pit area. And it'll be a slick pit stop by the Schnitzer crew. Change of drivers. Car in for mechanical repairs has made its way up to 4th in the race at this stage. Race leader, though, car number 8, Win Percy. Co-driver Tom Walkingshaw put the car up front. Anders Olofsson in car number 2, the second of the Volvos going through, and there's Chicotto in car number 1. BMW back out in the field, and he should be able to retain 4th place at this stage. Uh-oh, troubles for Sydney driver Graham Bailey, the 2nd race in a row, in the top 4, and he's bunkered the Commodore. Car number 8, 2 in a row. Win Percy takes the checkered flag, and 5th place to Alan Moffat.
Well, as far as looking through the windscreen, it was just sleet, and the traction was unbelievable. You just get used to one little set of circumstances, and when it came down, because the snow is much more in volume than ordinary water that we have in Australia, it got wet in a hurry. So it was patchy all over the place, and 1 minute you'd be braking fine, next minute you'd be understeering off the track.
So disappointment for the Australians and elation for Scott Tom Walkingshaw and Win Percy, their 2nd straight victory this year. Here's how they placed. First going to the Bastos Rover pilots, Walkingshaw and Percy. 2nd to the Schnitzer BMW of Gerhard Berger. 3rd to Anders Olofsson and Granberg in the Volvo. 4th to John Franco Brancatelli in the Rover. And 5th to the Mobile Commodore of Peter Brock and Alan Moffat. So much for Donington. Well, we have the cars coming to grid up now for the sprint race for the Better Brakes AMSCAR Touring Car Series here at Amaroo Park this afternoon. The distance, of course, is 5 laps. The field about the same. From position number 1 is car number 1, Jim Richards in the BMW. From 2, car 4, John Bowe, the Volvo. From position 375, Colin Bond in the Alpha. From 425, Tony Longhurst in the BMW. From 534, Gary Rogers in the BMW. From 628, Tony Cavich in the Commodore. From 7, car 12, Gary Wilmington in the Jag. From 847, Brian Callahan. From position 977, Peter Williamson in the Toyota. From position number 10, car 19, Ken Matthews. From 1129, Ken Davidson. And rounding out the field, car 12, Bob Holden. From 1358, David Ratcliffe in the Toyota Levin. And 1416, Kevin Clark in the Mustang. There's the Mando that will be looking for an overall win in the series here today at Amaroo, and I speak of the Australian Touring Car Champion, Jimmy Richards, and the JPS BMW car number 1. We're about 7 seconds away from the start of the sprint race, 5 laps the distance. And they're racing, and Richards
Richards gets off quickly, but Bow goes right with him as they run door handle to door handle, heading up Bitchapay for the first time. And it's John Bow, in fact, on the outside who will get the jump, heading over the top of Nissan Skyline and dropping down into Dunlop Loop. Bow, followed by Jim Richards on the outside. Next is Colin Bond, then Tony Cabbage getting away to a good start in the yellow Commodore.
Big effort by Cabbage, too, to get away as quickly as he did. Tony Longhurst on the second row of the grid has dropped back to about 6th position.
He's been able to come from behind in most of his other races, but here's a good challenge as Richards goes in and under John Bow, puts a little of the Amaroo pressure on, and look at Colin Bond, who gets up very smartly there on the inside as well. Bow comes fighting back on the inside. Bond will go in deeper under brakes as they go into the bottom turn. Good scrap here in the sprint. Richards leading from Colin Bond, followed by Bow, followed by Tony Cabbage and Barry Graham's partner Brian Callahan, then up into 5th in the field.
1 lap completed. Richards holding pride of place. Colin Bond, who goes so well here at Amaroo Park, slotting into second now. Here's Bow coming out of the challenge as they go up the hill. He won't get through there. Cabbage doing really well in the Commodore, carrying the flag for them here this weekend at Amaroo Park.
Tremendous start from Colin Bond. Didn't get off the line brilliantly, but by the end of that first lap, he'd made up an enormous amount of ground. And now, if anything, starts to pull away just a little from John Bow. And a strong performance from Cabbage, and Longhurst still dicing with Callahan.
Coming out of Honda Corner, down towards the lake again. Bond maybe just a fraction closer this time to Jimmy Richards. John Bow shuffle back to 3rd, Cabbage, and then Longhurst really putting the others, the middle markers, under plenty of pressure.
Callahan trying to go round Longhurst out of the lake turn, not successful, of course. And they've got Gary Wilmington in the big Jag parked right in behind them.
Across the line, Richards, Colin Bond, the Amaroo Ace, the Ignis Alpha, number 75. That looks like Clark in the Mustang. He's gone off the circuit over on the back part of the course. Here's the scrap, though. Bondy at 75 attempts to haul in Jim Richards, at the same time keeping John Bow under control.
With the continual development on the BMW and the Alpha, they've trimmed some half a second out of the lap record that was held here by Jim Richards at the earlier meeting this year. So they've really got the car circulating well at the moment. This car here, car 4, the left-hand drive Volvo dealer team entry of John Bow's, running a different engine this weekend by comparison to the engine that it ran last week at Surfers. And they're now much happier with the car's performance.
Tony Longhurst has shaken off Brian Callahan and is now mounting a challenge on Tony Cabbage. That's the battle for 4th spot. Up in front, of course, it's still Richards, Bond and Bow.
2 laps remaining in this 5-lap sprint contest for today's Better Brakes AMSCAR Touring Car Series at Amaroo Park. Gentleman Jim, the JPS number 1, leads. Heading down to Mazda Corner, about 3 car lengths back to Colin Bond and the Ignis Alpha 75, and then maybe half a car length then back to John Bow.
Gee, Richards is really sprinting away from them now, isn't he?
He certainly is. And Tony Longhurst putting plenty of pressure on Tony Cabbage. He's been the mover in this race.
In fact, yes, he's got by Cabbage, although Cabbage is having another go at him as they come down towards the lake. Richards going round that corner. There's Bond, there's Bow, 1, 2, 3.
Coming up for signal, final lap. It's going to be Jimmy Boyd. Look at the scrap here. Tony Longhurst and Tony Cabbage. Tony gets stronger as each heat goes on. He should be dynamite by the time they come to the 20-lapper later this afternoon. Here's the race leader, though, Jimmy Richards in car number 1 into Dunlop Loop, and well control of the situation as he heads now to Mazda.
Richards in 5th place in the series at the moment with 62 points after 2 rounds, and it's in fact his teammate who's having the dice back in the minor placings who leads. There he is, Longhurst. Reversal of places you can see between John Bow and Colin Bond, so that battle for 2nd and 3rd is really raging. Half a lap to go now before Richards takes out the 5-lapper.
Down to the lake corner for the final time. The 1985 National Touring Car Champion, Jimmy Richards. A good day here at Amaroo Park. Comes into Camalco Wonderlic turn for the final time. The stretch out to take the checker. Gentleman Jim is first across the line for the JBS team. Johnny Bow will take 2nd in the Valvoline Volvo. Colin Bond will take 3rd in the Ignis Alpha. And Cabbage gets back around Tony Longhurst to pick up the 4th place. But a very interesting sprint race. The distance 5 laps. Let's recap the placings on the Castrol scoreboard. Jimmy Richards is the race winner. John Bow takes 2nd. Bondy picks up 3rd.
on the infield at Amaroo Park. Bap Romano in good hands. The New South Wales Ambulance Service decided not to transport him by road to hospital. The Westpac rescue helicopter has been called in, and it's standing by right beside the ambulance on the infield, and Bap Romano about to be placed aboard the helicopter for the trip to hospital. I would assume Westmead Hospital. And as I said, we'll have a further report on his condition, but he has leg problems, broken leg possibly, and some internal injuries as a result of the Cosworth going into the wall and the entrance to Dunlop Loop, as we saw earlier in our telecasts. And of course, this has thrown the program here at Amaroo Park this afternoon into total confusion, but the prime concern on the part of everybody here, spectators, Australian Racing Drivers Club officials, and of course all the marshals and the ambulance officers, is for the safety and well-being of Bap Romano. They're making haste very slowly because the man obviously is injured to a considerable degree, but was conscious and talking, as you heard Chris Clearahan say earlier in the interview with Neil Crompton, at the top of the circuit. And they're just making very sure that he is secure, in no pain, and double-checking, and I would imagine radioing ahead to the hospital the extent, in their opinion, of his injuries before the helicopter takes off. You can see that the cars have been brought out onto the grid on the right-hand side of the screen in preparation for the next scheduled event. That will get underway as soon as the infield track is cleared. The next event, by the way, is the Goodyear Car Owners Club Laser Series, the 4th round. Over 5 laps. It was scheduled for 8, but has been reduced to 5 laps. And we might check the grid while we have a few minutes before a race time. Mark Scaife is on pole position in car number 2, and alongside him on the front row of the grid in 41 is Peter Dane. They're the two that top the series at the present stage. Second row of the grid, car 24, Baron Robertson, and then car 3, Jamie McHugh. Row 3, car 17, Andrew Harris, and 11, Steve Williams. On the 4th row, car 5, Shane Press, and 19, Graham Blanche. On the 5th row, 38, Ian Poosty, and car 77, Garth Downey. And on the 6th row, car 39, Graham Treasure, and car 42, David Morton. Completing the field, we also have car 28, Grant Grubel, 51, Dennis Rogers, 20, Martin Segulan, and car 10, Richard Gartner. Full field of 16 to go around in this event.
Peter Dane, the man who is in second place in this championship at the moment with 81 points, starting from the front row of the grid and sharing the front row with Mark Scaife, who leads the series with a total of 84 points. Steve Williams is in third with 61. Baron Robertson, 57. Richard Gartner, 55. Jamie McHugh there from Queensland. Saw him run last weekend at Surfers Paradise. There's Baron Robertson. It's a good class of racing, this. There's plenty of money up for grabs. Tremendous support from Goodyear. And a fine opportunity for younger drivers, particularly, to make their presence felt.
Quick calculation, Neil Crompton, by the way, now that we've had 2 heats of the Better Breaks AMSCAR Series concluded and 1 to go, the 20-lapper later on the program. Going into today's meeting, Tony Longhurst was a narrow leader in the series from Colin Bond, but it's now John Bauer who leads. Oh, that's today's points. Today's points. I see the points based on today's 2 heat results. John Bauer on 54, Richards on 48, Bond on 48, Longhurst on 40, and then Cabbage on 32. So those points will be calculated at the end of the day, and we'll see how that affects the overall point score for the series. But going into today's meeting, as I mentioned, Longhurst the leader from Colin Bond.
So Bap Romano being loaded into the chopper at the moment for the run into Sydney. And as soon as the ambulance has been released, then racing will commence once again very shortly for round 4 in this Goodyear Car Owners Club Series. Big field. Sorry, Mike.
I was just going to say, I think we're only probably a minute or so away from action resuming. The interesting thing being, Neil, that Bap had promised you earlier today a run in his car next week to just see how the power curve of the Cosworth really felt.
The offer still holds, provided Neil picks up the tab for the repairs.
Seem to have misplaced my wallet somewhere. There's Mark Scaife. I guess that's just one of the unfortunate things that happens in that type of car from time to time. Not much you can do about it, but Bap was talking down there, and he's a very fit man. That'll be on his side. It appears as though he's just got some leg injuries, and hopefully all is okay. The unusual thing about it, just talking to the boys up there, is that the car went straight into the wall, and there's no marks, there's no brake skidding, nothing. He's just driven straight in, so perhaps a throttle locked wide open, he made a mistake. But anyway, back to a positive nature of racing at the moment. 30 seconds to go before the start of the Goodyear Car Owners Club Series round 4, and I'm glad I'm in the commentary box. And Mark Scaife on the front row with Peter Dane, Baron Robertson, and Jamie McHugh on the second row. A very close points battle, and 10 seconds remaining before the start. And this class has always turned on the action for us here at Amaroo Park. National flag raised. Ready for a jump, and the flag down. Mark Scaife making a very good start. Peter Dane into second place. Jamie McHugh quickly up into third. Williams there in the orange and white car 11 having a look for fourth place. He's alongside Baron Robertson. This will be a very tight squeeze to the top. McHugh, though, has made excellent ground to the top of the hill, and more drama.
Goodness gracious
6 or 7 cars involved in this as they went to the top of the hill. Amaroo Park in the wars today.
I think Peter Dane's won out in the battle up front, though.
I think the majority have managed to get through the loop and now work their way down onto the back straight towards Mazda Corner, and here they come. What a scrap we've had too.
I think Peter Dane has the lead.
They sweep through there, coming down now to the left-hander at Honda Corner. Dane is in front, comes through the turn, 3 wide through there. And, of course, right behind him, Mark Scaife in number 2.
Jamie McHugh in third place, and in car number 11, Steve Williams has moved up to fourth, coming off 6th position on the grid.
Dane in car number 41, doing another superlative job as he comes through this very short straight for the run to the main straight, end of lap number 1. Bearing in mind this race has been shortened to 5 laps, so it's 4 to go. A real sprint affair. Williams has come out of nowhere. And Jamie McHugh, I think, has made pretty good ground as well. So it's Dane from Scaife. This is the battle for first and second across the top of the hill. And there's McHugh in the white and blue car.
I said Baron Robertson, car 24, came off the third position on the grid, shuffled back to 6th. I don't know whether he was involved in that scuffle at the top of the hill. I thought he would have been well clear of that. Shane Press, car 5, also moving up well.
Some great prize money up for offer in the Goodyear Car Owners Club Challenge Series for 1986 here at Amaroo Park Raceway.
More money in this than there is in touring cars.
That's true. There's $1,500 for a win in this meeting today, and if you win the series overall, you'll pick up $3,000, and a lot of support from the major companies supporting this, including the Goodyear Car Owners Club. And this is the battle for first and second, with Mark Scaife working very hard, the youngster from the central coast of New South Wales, winner of the Encouragement Award, the most promising young talent in last year's series. Steve Williams, car 11, been in the thick of things all year. He's in fourth place, and he's got a comfortable gap over Shane Press in fifth.
As you mentioned, strong support from the Goodyear Car Owners Club, Chevy at wheels, Century batteries, and of course Valvoline for this series. A lot of prize money, as we said before, at stake. Dropping down into Dunlop Loop, and it's still Dane, just holding on from Scaife and McHugh as they exit Dunlop Loop. Work down to the right-hand kink at Mazda Corner. But commanding the situation at the moment is Peter Dane, as we saw here at the last round at Amaroo Park. Also driving the Goodyear Car Owners Club entry, so he's up for the double whammy here this afternoon if he can pick up the prize money.
Peter Dane was the winner of last year's series. Mark Scaife finished fourth. So Dane getting on with the job again in 86. Ultimately trying to take out his second successive Goodyear Car Owners Club series in this little laser, and Scaife just kissing the fence that time, wiping the door handle along the paint. The Tyre Town entry not looking too battle-scarred, however, and the gap remains pretty well the same between the two leaders. McHugh just losing touch a fraction, and if anything, Steve Williams coming into contention just a little more. How close can Mark Scaife get to the back of Peter Dane? It must be very difficult to see the road from that angle. He sweeps out wide, actually gets the thing sideways. Don't go out there. There's gravel, there's rubber, there's all sorts of things waiting to greet a driver if you make blues out there.
Down to Mazda Corner again. A little of the pressure off Dane because Scaife got a little wobbly on the approach then to Dunlop.
Just about a lap and a half to go in this shortened event.
They've dropped McHugh off at this stage. Once again to the left-hander at Honda. And there's the gap, first to second, then back to third.
Well, Mark getting in strife again, coming through Honda Corner, ran wide, missed his apex and got out onto the ripple strips. So a little bit of panic creeping into his driving, but he's having a big throw into the right-hander at the late corner, closes under brakes. Look at this. He's made up an enormous amount of time, even in half a lap. Certainly gets points for trying hard, this youngster.
There's the last lap board going out for the leaders. Cross the start-finish line. Up the hill they go. Peter Dane, Mark Scaife. The battle between them, and I guess that's fitting because they lead the series. Barry Jones, whom we used to see to great effect in touring cars and in production car racing here at Amaroo and elsewhere, prepared the engines for both these cars. He's done a pretty good job.
Down through Mazda corner now. Peter Dane. Mark Scaife still trying to challenge, but I think time has beaten young Mark here today. Dane comes down to Honda corner. Jamie McHugh still holding down a strong third on the road. And Steve Williams back behind him in car number 11. And of course, car number 5 rounding out the top 5, and that's Shane Press. We come down past the Lake corner, the short straight now, the run to Camalco Wonderlic turn. Coming up for the completion of the Goodyear Car Owners Cup Laser Series this afternoon, and it's going to be a win to Peter Dane. He takes the checkered flag.
Certainly does, and does it pretty well too. Good battle between the top pair, Peter Dane and Mark Scaife. Of course, we saw quite a few cars take themselves out of the action at the top of the hill the first time, and I think you'll find that it was car 19, Graham Blanche, who got himself out of shape first of all, and a crunch between several of them. Garth Downey in 77, car 39 in that Graham Treasure, and I think Grant Grubel, it looks like, in car 28, just disappearing in the smoke there at the top of the track. 4 or 5 involved, and bits and pieces flying everywhere. That took care of them, but nobody was going to take care of Peter Dane today. He had it all his own way up front after the early battle with Mark Scaife. Scaife tried as hard as he could, but not successful on the day. Peter Dane, the winner on our Castrol scoreboard for this event, the Goodyear Car Owners Club Laser Series. Mark Dane in second place, and Jamie McHugh was third. That's how it sorted out after the 5 laps. And a pretty exciting event it was too. So those two continue to lead the series here, Peter Dane and Mark Scaife. More news now with Neil Crompton.
Camalco Wonderlic Sports Sedan Series continues here today at Amaroo Park, but beneath a cloud of controversy. The Confederation of Australian Motorsport wants to change the sports sedan regulations. They want to remove the flares and the wings and impose a 10-year age limit on these cars. Now with me is John Hammond of the Sports Sedan Association of Australia. And John, that's a move that you definitely don't agree with.
That is for sure, Neil. We don't agree at all.
Well, why not? What's the problem?
What CAMS are trying to do is to remove the current image of sports sedans and make them look like Group C cars.
Do you think there's an argument for that? Don't you think that some of these cars, for example, are getting a little long in the tooth?
Some cars, maybe Austin A40s, maybe a little bit long in the tooth, but apart from that, we don't see any need to create a category of cars which look like Group B cars, Group A cars. Sports sedans warrant an image of all of their own.
Well, why is that? Is it just a tug of war between you and the Confederation, or is there a genuine need for the flares, the wings and the age limits on these cars?
Traditionally, sports sedans represent the potential to be innovative with cars, not necessarily look like a showroom floor car. There's no need for another category the same as showroom floor cars, which is Group A or Group E.
Is it going to cost competitors a lot of money if they change these cars?
This particular car will cost in the vicinity of $6,000 to convert back to CAM's proposed rules, to no avail.
And how many cars would be eliminated if this move goes ahead?
Our estimate is a minimum of 80% of the sports sedans that are currently in Australia.
Well, one man that's very competitively campaigned a sports sedan in Australia for a long time is Brian Thompson. And Brian, for you, I guess the change in sports sedans would be a fairly dramatic one.
Yes, we've already gone through the traumatic experience of complying with CAM's wishes with GT cars, and they instituted a car class that just didn't have enough competitors. We were given authority to uprate our cars. The class went for 3 years and suddenly stopped. We're left with very expensive motor cars and we can't do anything with it. We've now converted the Monza, which is one of the most advanced cars in the category, back to sports sedan category again, and now they spring this upon us that in 3 or 4 months' time that effort's going to be aborted as well, and we don't think it goes along with the original concept of sports sedans, which according to CAMS's own published book on the subject is the ultimate development of the production-based car. And aerodynamics is one area that they're saying that we've got to get rid of, whereas in production motor car, aerodynamics is the thing that's in the industry. And we're going to end up with a whole series of look-alike races that the public can see by driving down the street. Our cars are just, the Star Wars cars are just not going to be there.
you were one of the drivers some years ago who was very popular in sports sedan racing, but of course times have changed in Australia. Competitors have gone on to Group A, Group B and so forth. Do you think that perhaps it is a case of beating a dead horse?
Not at all. I also compete in Group A. In that situation, it's purely a manufacturer's championship. We're talking about the grassroots of Australian motorsport, the people who form probably 70 or 80% of the total competitors in the arena. Now, I believe that any regulation that's going to eliminate 80% of a category is just the wrong regulation. It's not right.
It's certainly a raging argument, one that I'm sure will continue for a long time. You can make your decision when we return at Amaroo Park to look at round 3 of the Comelco Wonderlic Sports Sedan Series. Back at Amaroo Park for the Comelco Wonderlic Sports Sedan Series. And cars on the grid. In fact, we might take a look at the top 12 as they line up for this 5-lap encounter. From pole position, Keith Carling in the Mazda RX-7. Alongside him, Mike Griffin. On the second row of the grid, Brian Thompson in the big Chevy Monza with Bob Jolly in the Commodore. The third row of the grid, Bill Attard in an RX-7, sharing that row with Graham Stones, also in an RX-7 Mazda. The fourth row of the grid is Albert Cedars in the RX-7. And alongside him, John Vernon in an Escort. The fifth row of the grid, Trevor Ashby in an Escort, Eric Jones in an Alfa Romeo, and rounding out the top 12 drivers will be Tony Herbert in an Escort and Chris Hones in a BMW 320i.
Ah, some pretty girls there too.
Mike Griffin, he's on the front row in car 41. I think I've mentioned on a number of occasions, one of the original RX-7s brought into this country. And he will be very pleased to have recorded a time of 51.43. There is the big booming Chevy Monza being driven by Brian Thompson, formerly driven, of course, by Alan Grice. Peter Brock took his turn at the wheel for a while. The former Bob Jane entry. Alongside him is Bob Jolly from Victoria. Both of these mobiles powered by thundering great V8 Chevs.
Total of 25 starters here. You reckon this isn't going to be fun over 5 laps?
It's a real blistering sprint race. So it's an interesting exercise. You've got 2 rotaries on the front row of the grid and 2 big V8s on the second row. So 2 different kinds of technology in very different parcels at the moment. Lightweight RX-7s, the bigger, heavier Chev Monza. 10 seconds before the national flag is dropped and the field will be on its way. It is a huge field, Brooko. They're stretched right around Comelco corner.
Getting ready, and they're racing and getting away quickly indeed on the inside. Carly, but Griffin grabs the second gear, goes with a Jolly, tries to split them, heading up the hill for the first time. Thompson in for the ride to the top of the hill as they head to Nissan Skyline for the first time. Just look at the field streaming through. Down into Dunlop Loop. Carling getting the best of it as they swing through Dunlop. 13 going through as well.
Eric Jones in the new Alfetta.
Hey, hasn't he made a brilliant start?
He came out of nowhere to come up into 4th position. Brian Thompson there in 3rd. The man that slipped back an awfully long way was Mike Griffin in the RX-7. So it's Keith Carling from Dubbo in New South Wales, from Bob Jolly, Brian Thompson, then Jones, and then the rest of the field streaming through and elbowing their way into Honda corner.
Heading down to the lake for the first time, Keith Carling in the Mazda, just holding out Bob Jolly.
He said to me before the start of the race, if only I can get in their way, and more cars off the circuit back at Honda corner. A couple of the back markers, car 109 in there.
The flag is out as they stretch it up the hill. Carling now leads. Here's Jolly going for the inside run. Thompson goes the outside. Do they get to the top? Not much room there for error. Carling into Dunlop Loop. Jolly, Victorian driver who enjoys his sports sedan racing here at Amaroo Park, and also Brian Thompson. They're having a great scrap, but they've got a lot of work to do yet to get on even terms with Keith Carling.
Little Mazda produces about 300 brake horsepower and is a very light car, around about 750 kilos. And that's its real advantage, that it's so nimble. In fact, he was saying he had an awful lot of trouble trying to get tyres that he could get to come up to temperature on this car. Most people are worrying about wearing tyres out and overheating them. Bob Jolly in 2nd place, looking to force his way through on the inside, and I think he might have just squeezed through side by side.
Oh, isn't it dull racing with the wings too? Heading up the hill, and Jolly goes through to take over the lead. An absolute brilliant move there, splitting them, heading to the top of Betchapave Hill once again. Here's Jolly.
Look at Thompson arguing on the outside, almost rubbing the flares as he went through Dunlop. Gee, that was very close. So Jolly in car 3 in the McCulloch entry.
And Thompson, Kenworth Trucks entry, looking for just a simple mistake here on the part of Bob Jolly. Jolly keeping it nice and straight on the road as he comes down to the left-hander at Honda. Tell you what, for Thunder and Lightning, I think these cars haven't put the spectators up on their feet at Amaroo.
I spoke with Brad Jones before this event. He's driven the Chev Monza car number 4 for Brian Thompson, done a bit of test driving. He said you just cannot believe it when you light it up. An example there as Thompson comes out of that right-hander in second gear and lays an enormous bed of rubber as he puts power to the ground. There's Carling. Very exciting driving one of these to the top of the hill. Carling still hanging on in third place from the Alfa Romeo, driven by Eric Jones. Look at Thompson working hard at the wheel, keeping this car online.
Thompson still has it all to do with the race shortened now to 5 laps from its original intended distance of 10. Oh, Jolly a little sideways, and now Thompson slips down, thinking about an inside. Jolly closes the door. They come out of Honda corner.
Just over a lap to go. Car 14 in third place, Keith Carling still.
Carling's actually closed the gap a little once more as Brian Thompson attempts to figure out a way of putting more rubber on the road and getting through on the inside. Last lap board comes out. Carling still in touch there in third place.
Here comes
Thompson, the last-minute desperate manoeuvre. Very difficult place to do it. There's Jones in the background in fourth in the Alfa Romeo. Thompson, of course, one of the great supporters of Australian motor racing in all kinds of classes. He loves getting into this Monza. He's really making a fist of it at the moment. Battle between the two Victorians. Can Thompson get through? Jolly attempting to keep himself as wide as he can in the closing stages.
Have absolutely had it between them since the start of the race. Mike Griffin, who came off the front row, dropped back immediately and hasn't been sighted since. And the top 3 have had it between them, Carling, Thompson and Jolly. And coming around the last corner, it's Bob Jolly from Victoria in front. He's going to take the checkered flag, no doubt about it. Bob Jolly is first, Brian Thompson second, and the early leader, Keith Carling, slots into third position as they cross the finish line at the end of 5 very hectic laps here at Amaroo Park this afternoon in the Comalco Wonderlic Sports Sedan Series, round 3. Bob Jolly from Victoria, here's the winner. Brian Thompson takes second, and Keith Carling slots into third place. That's the 1, 2, 3 after the Comalco Wonderlic Sports Sedan race here this afternoon. Well, my goodness gracious me, I don't know what happened to Mike Griffin, as I said, but once you lose a half a car length in this class, you get nowhere. Well, you've had the placings. That's the action in the sports sedans. Now here's Mike Raymond.
Each year in the Australian Touring Car Championship, we manage to pick up a young driver who makes a lot of progress during the course of the season. Last year, of course, for Alfa Romeo, Alan Jones stole the limelight. And for the JPS BMW team this year, it's been a case of no baloney from young Tony. 29-year-old Tony Longhurst is currently the big mover on the Australian touring car scene. His performances in the JPS BMW 325 have been outstanding, not only in the touring car title rounds, but also the domestic Better Breaks tournament here at Amaroo Park. Amaroo has been a happy hunting ground for the young Queenslander. He first gained the attention of BMW team chief Frank Gardner here during the Alfa Romeo one-make stakes 2 years ago. The racing was tight and there were no beg your pardons. Going into the last race, he and Alan Grice couldn't be separated. And when young Tony had a number put on him by the Sydney veteran, he retaliated.
I just try very hard all the time, and probably I get myself into a little bit of strife now and then. But, you know, if you don't try, you don't get there. And the results this year and probably in the Alpha Series prove that you must get in there and have a go.
You're the sort of guy that we've noticed that doesn't take too much monkey business from other drivers.
I work a bit along the principle of like attracts like. If someone gives me a hard time, I give them a hard time back. And the guys that look after me or applied on the track, like Bondi or Brock or Jim or Dick Johnson, you know, they'll give you a car with, they won't give you any more, and so you can have a good race with them. But you get a few wankers that will come across in front of you and push you out of the way or hold you up, and, you know, I just return the favour.
Things have been coming up roses for the Gold Coast construction supervisor since the start of the year. His wet weather performance during the Nissan Mobile 500 in Wellington was superb. While others floundered in the rain, young Tony got quicker. He was the moral victor in the Waterfront Enduro, despite his untimely exit in the closing stages when a wheel came adrift off his BMW. Frank Gardner is well known for his talent-spotting ability, and Longhurst is already delivering the goods. He's chased big cars throughout the Australian Touring Car Series and made some of our superstars work hard for their money.
I thought Tony showed out probably marginally better than a couple of other young lads I had my eye on. It's a thing, appearance, conversation, but basically mainly talent.
No regrets?
Probably will if he puts one on the roof, but the man who never drops one's never had a go.
One could have been excused for thinking Longhurst had a vendetta against Ford entrants last Sunday at Surfers Paradise. When Kiwi David Oxton zigged in his Ford Sierra, Tony zagged in the BMW, and that triggered off a skirmish. A few laps later, he pulled off the pass of the day on Dick Johnson, rounding him up on the outside. It was vintage David and Goliath stuff, and you guessed it, David won.
I enjoy having a fight and coming from behind. It gets a little bit frustrating when you do all the work in the corners and under brakes. You pull onto the straight and they disappear into the sunset. But I hope that later on when I get a more powerful car that it's going to help me, because I've had to fight now for the last 2 years virtually.
Do you think that makes a better driver, that you understand you have to fight for everything rather than starting up the front, you're doing it from the back of the field?
I think it can't hurt you because you're aware of the difficulties. On the fast circuits, when big cars come up on me, I let them pass without holding them up ever at all. But when I can have a scrap with them, I really give them a hard time.
Looks like you just love your motor racing, Tony.
It's great, it really is good.
No doubt about it. Bob Jolly, that Commodore of yours has got everything it takes. The way the turbos are dishing it up in the Touring Car Championship, maybe Brocky could do with one of those.
Yes, that's probably a point, Gary.
3 trips to Amaroo this year. I think you won here at the opening meeting, second last meeting, win again today. You've got the series by the throat.
It's looking that way, Gary. It's certainly shaping up to be very good.
Bob, without getting too political, because we don't have time, what about these proposals to demolish the sports sedans as we know them? I don't think you'd agree with that.
Well, my opinion is it's a bit of a shame. I mean, people like to watch cars with, in my opinion, with wings and side skirts. And
they sound good too, don't they?
Yeah, certainly. I think they can still sound the same with the new rules, but they certainly look impressive with all the fairings and so forth.
John Baden is here from Camalco Wunderlich to make the presentation. Well deserved on your victory today.
Thank you, John.
Congratulations, Bob. On behalf of Camalco Wunderlich, I'd like to present you with the award and on a very well won race.
Very good, John. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John Baden, and congratulations to Bob Jolly. Big effort.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, Bob now clear leader, as I said, in the Camalco Wunderlich Sports Sedan Series here at Amaroo Park. Now, here's Mike Raymond.
Thank you, Gary Wilkinson. And we have the cars shortly to come out of the pits for the Stallion Stables 2WS Group E Series at Amaroo Park. Let's go down to the pits and to Neil Crompton.
Production car racing continues to gain popularity here at Amaroo Park, and today we've got a couple of new faces and an all-new car in the field, John Smith and John Burke. It's an exciting project, but I guess this new car is really going to give some of the leading contenders a bit of stick, John.
Yeah, not straight away, Neil. We've got a fair bit of development doing the car. Only had it 3 weeks, but I think in a matter of a short time, we'll be giving them a big hurry up.
Brian Hilton and Toyo have invested a lot of money in these 2 cars, and I wonder for what reason.
Well, we believe there's a good possibility of being a production series next year, and the sponsors are pretty keen to get involved with it, and I think if it comes off, it'd be a big thing for the production cars and motor racing.
A national championship, in fact, really becoming a junior touring car title would be a promising thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, there's nothing around at the moment to get you, well, to find out how good people are, and we're sort of committed ourselves in these 2 cars and trying to do the best we can and prove that we are all right.
Well, you've wheeled in the big talent this weekend. You've got John Smith here as well, touring car exponent, former open wheeler superstar. Smithy, what's it like in a Group E production car?
Mate, I don't mind it too much at all. I enjoy the racing. It's really good. The Celica obviously is a little bit down on power compared to the Super and the Starions, but being the only lead-free cars in the field too, they're doing a little bit tough. But I think as it works out next year, everything's got to be lead-free, and I think the team has done the right thing getting a flying start with it. That's the best thing that I can see.
You've had a lot of experience in racing of all forms. Do you think it's a good thing to foster young talent in this type of class and shoot towards a national championship?
It is a good class to be in. It's not the most, not the dearest class in the world, and it's not the cheapest. But by the same token, it is a good way to get the young talent into the class. Obviously, if you do well in Group E, then you can go on to Group A, and that's the best way you look at it. So I think they'll foster a lot of young talent with it.
You've done more front-wheel drive racing in the last 6 months than in your whole life.
It has been, actually have been too. It's the front-wheel drive Corolla twin cam that we use in Group A, and the twin cam front-wheel drive Celica as well in Group E. So I'm enjoying it.
John, for you, it's a fair contrast, isn't it? Because, in fact, you've gone from a sports sedan to a production car. Has that been a problem for you?
Oh, not really. The only thing I find a little bit difficult is in the Celica we had before, it had turbocharger on it, and you could just point it and put your foot down, and then the wheel spin all the way to the next corner. With this car, you've got to be a little bit more fastidious with the cornering, and I enjoy it. I think it's a lot more rewarding, and I think sponsors get a better value out of it.
Well, they certainly will, and we look forward to seeing what happens, and we'll return to Amaroo Park after this break to see all of the manufacturers and the new cars in round 3 of the Stallion Stable 2WS Production Car Series.
Thank you, Neil. Let's have a look at the way they'll line up today. Of course, we've got a very, very strong field for the Stallion Stables 2WS Group E. The field is Mark Gibbs starting off pole position in the Commodore. From 2 car 3, Peter Fitzgerald in the Starion. From 364, Des Gibbs in the Starion. From 4 car 2, Brad Jones in the Perrier Starion. From 585, Greg East in the Commodore. From 6 car 10, Brian Potts in the Commodore. From 7 car 70, Ray Spence in a Starion. From 825, Roland Hill in the Commodore. From 977, John Burke in the Supra. From 1078, Johnny Smith in the Celica. From 11 car 20, Alan Springett in the Commodore. From 12, car number 24, Ken Gridrod in a Commodore, and also a very strong field behind them. A lot of other cars, John Sutter, Peter Granger, Leo Gagan, and looking down through there to see Tony Gregg's also qualified today, 22nd position on the field. So, once again, the Group E cars turn out with very, very strong numbers here at Amaroo Park Raceway.
And there's the leader in the series with 51 points, Peter Fitzgerald. Shares that point score with Desi Gibbs from Wagga in a Mitsubishi Starion. Mark Gibbs there in car 50, the Holden Commodore, has been the man to watch. He was the winner of the preliminary race here earlier today, and he lies in 3rd place in the series with 49 points. Brad Jones in the Perrier Mitsubishi Starion with 49 points. Brian Potts in the Commodore has 40. Roland Hill 34. There's Des Gibbs in the silver Recar entry. Brian Potts there, car 10. Greg East, a promising performance in the first heat in car number 85. He and Potts had a tremendous dust-up. And the rest of the field there, John Smith in car 78 did a wonderful job in the front-wheel drive Celica.
I think we're about 10 seconds away from the start. The Stallion Stables 2WS race here at Amaroo, and Fitzgerald gets off smartly here on the outside of Mark Gibbs. But Gibbs will head him heading up Bitchapave, and we take race cam, of course, with Peter Fitzgerald Starion heading to the top of Bitchapave, where they'll drop down into Dunlop Loop.
And that was Des Gibbs squeezing up there in the silver car. Fitzgerald getting attacked by Brian Potts. It gives you some idea of the sort of jostling that goes on at the top turn first time round. Looking through the eyes, of course, of Sevens race cam in Peter Fitzgerald's car. So it's Gibbs the leader. Des Gibbs in 2nd place. Peter Fitzgerald, Brian Potts, and more strife at the Dunlop Loop. Car number 27 in trouble, the little charade, as the field launches down in towards the left-hander at Honda. John Burke and John Smith side by side in the Central Coast Express entries. The 2 Toyotas there having a great battle.
To the late corner, car number 50, Mark Gibbs, the pole sitter. How close do they get to the wall? And he comes through Wunderlich corner, still leading. Coming up for the completion of the first of 5 laps today. The abbreviated Stallion Stables Radio 2WS Group E Production Series.
Very exciting class of racing this. The field has really swollen in the last few meetings. I think it's the biggest entry that we've seen. And the battle between the Starions and the Commodores has been an absolute beauty. So we've got Potts at the moment giving Fitzgerald plenty to think about. But the outstanding performer is Mark Gibbs, who continues to pull away from this field. There's Brad Jones in the background in the Perrier entry. Good to have a new vehicle in there this weekend in the new Toyota Supra. And still some very exciting vehicles to come, not the least of which will be the new turbocharged Mazda RX-7, which we're all waiting for with great anticipation. Should really stir up this bunch.
To the late corner, Mark Gibbs, car number 50. And I tell you what, he's opening a bit of a gap up here, Walker, over the rest of them. There's Peter Fitzgerald still holding third in car number 3. There's Gibbs wall position. And we take race cam in Peter Fitzgerald. Starion heading up Bitchapave again. Comes down into Dunlop Loop, not making any ground up. Good scrap behind him though. There's Brad Jones going right around the outside if he can.
Well, Brad's one out and one wide there, isn't he? He's well and truly wide.
One out and one back, as they say at the trots.
Yeah, I tell you what, he hasn't given up though. He's
look at this.
Switched back here on the inside.
Well, one out and one back's supposed to be the place to be.
Not at Amaroo Park.
Not at Amaroo Park.
Gee, that was a very nice manoeuvre, well thought through, and he did it without any fuss at all. He's now right onto the back of Fitzgerald. Blue smoke coming out of the back of one of the Commodores there. We had a glance in the background. So Brad Jones up into 4th position in a Perrier entry. In behind the east side, Mitsubishi and Peter Fitzgerald. So we've got 3 Starions here in 2nd, 3rd and 4th. 2 laps to go as Mark Gibbs crosses the start-finish line in the Holden Commodore, but all of the interest centred here in this battle for the minor placings. Fitzgerald now jumping out from behind the slipstream. Then this is the shot from race cam, a dab on the brakes from Des Gibbs. You can see the blue flag indicating to Des that another driver wants to get through. Look at these cars as they lurch around up at the Dunlop Loop. You can see just how far the track falls away from underneath you. Then you find yourself out on the ripple strips. Use it to your advantage to bounce back in on the road. And Brian Potts wanting a piece of the action as well in the Commodore. Under brakes at the left-hander at Honda corner. Des Gibbs, you can see fighting it away from the ripple strips, but he covers his ground quite nicely. In fact, pulling away just a little from Fitzgerald as they go down to the right-hand stop corner. Now Brad Jones makes an attack on the inside. He goes through into 3rd place. That was brave, but he's gone very wide. Fitzgerald wants to come through on the inside. Great stuff from race cam. Now Brad Jones closes the gate in no uncertain terms, gets up on the ripple strips, and he's done a good job after getting away pretty poorly there in the opening lap with now 1 lap to go.
Well, he's got a long way to go to make up that ground on our tearaway leader at this stage, Mark Gibbs in the Commodore. There's Gibbs going through, car number 50. Nicely in control as he heads down towards Mazda corner.
He did very well in last year's Laser Series and has adapted well to the production car. And
I'm afraid Brad Jones has got just too much of a gap to pull back in this Staying in Stables 2WS event.
Oh, it's all happening though. Brad sideways now. Fitzgerald goes through on the inside and takes that 3rd placing back again, but they had a crash as they went through the left-hander. You can see the race cam just shaking around because I think Brad went into the right-hand door of Fitzgerald, so it's all happening here with a 1/3 of a lap remaining. Mark Gibbs still the leader. Here's the scrap for 2nd and 3rd. Des Gibbs in 2nd, Peter Fitzgerald in 3rd, Brad Jones arguing for 4th. And the checkered flag comes out, a win for the Commodore driver. He's done that very easily. You couldn't say the same for 2nd and 3rd. And it's Des Gibbs, Peter Fitzgerald, Brad Jones in 4th.
Well, an interesting, very exciting Stay in Stables 2WS Group E Series race here this afternoon at Amaroo Park Raceway. Let's recap the placings for you on the Castrol scoreboard. The win goes to Gibbs, or to Gibbs rather. 2nd spot to Gibbs and 3rd to Fitzgerald. We'll be back for more in a moment.
Back at Amaroo Park, and there's no doubt that production racing really turns it on here each meeting, and the Stallion Stable 2WS Series continues to be a winner, and the winner of this round is Mark Gibbs. Congratulations, Mark. A fine performance, and let me see, I think you were about 3rd or 4th in the championship, and that will put you in very good stead.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any more words to say? You obviously did it very easily. I'm sure that didn't come quite so simply. You had to put a lot of work into the car, and I'm sure there are a few sponsors as well.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Ron Gillard. We've done a lot of work this week. Dunlop Tyres, Toddy's Tyres for helping us. I think they've got a lot to do with it. And a special thanks to the best Holden dealer in Sydney. It'd have to be Sutton's at Chilura for helping in this meeting. Thank you very much.
You seem to be doing it easily. I make that point again. You opened up a gap and maintained it. Obviously, you've come to terms with these cars very easily.
Yeah, well, the tyres are lasting, I think. That's the biggest thing.
Well, to present the cheque for today's outstanding performance, I've got Pete Graham with me from radio station 2WS here in Sydney. And Pete, that was a great performance from Mark.
Excellent give. Gibbsy, well done. Congratulations from Stallion Stables and all of us at 2WS. Good one.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you, Mark. And now let's take you back to Gary Wilkinson.
Cars will be on the track in a few minutes for the 10-lap Coca-Cola Bottlers Formula Ford race. We've already spoken to the man who leads the National Motorcraft Series, Warwick Brooklyn. Now it's time to take a look at the driver who bested him at Surfers Paradise last week and who could well prove to be the man to beat again here at Amaroo Park today. The name Brabham evokes memories of great deeds in Australian and international motorsport. And David Brabham is just one of 3 motor racing sons of the legendary 3-time World Drivers' Champion, Sir Jack Brabham. Sir Jack gives his boys every support, although he was always careful never to pressure them into following his tracks into motor racing. But when you grow up with the name Brabham, it's a challenge impossible to resist.
I've grown up with motor racing all through my life. It's a bit hard to get away from it once you're hooked, and here I am racing, so that's the way it is.
But having the name Brabham, does that put any special pressures on you once you actually get to the racetrack?
Yeah, there is some pressures. They all want to know how you're going and whether you're as good as your father is. There's that sort of pressure, but each race that goes by, I'm getting a lot used to it, so hopefully it won't bother me.
Eldest son Jeff already has an enviable international record, including a 3rd place at the 1983 Indianapolis 500. And he's qualified there again this weekend on the 8th row of the grid with a lap speed of 320 kilometres per hour. Gary Brabham, after an initial struggle to gain backing in Europe, is now proving his talent in Formula 2000 and Formula 3 racing. Sir Jack is here at Amaroo this weekend, just as he was at Surfers Paradise last weekend, to see David score an outstanding win in the 3rd round of the Motorcraft Formula Ford Driver to Europe Series.
I think David drove extremely well. He's come on very quickly. He's settled into the single-seater much quicker than I thought he might, and we're certainly hoping it's going to keep up.
How do you keep track of all 3 boys at the one time?
Well, I've got to spend a lot of time at 30,000 feet and spend a fortune on the telephone.
Of course, Jeff racing again in Indianapolis this weekend, and that will be fantastic.
Yes, actually, with David here at Amaroo and Jeffrey at Indianapolis, and we've got Gary at Silverstone.
Well, Jeff already has quite an international reputation. David still has a long way to go. Do you ever rate the boys on potential?
Well, it's pretty difficult to say at this stage, but David seems to have done extremely well in the initial start in motor racing and probably done better than the other 2 boys, so it's hard to say. They all drive very, very well.
David Brabham first came to notice in our motorsport telecasts last season when he contested the fiercely competitive Laser Series. With his aggressive driving style, he was always in the thick of it. The name Brabham drew plenty of attention from the other drivers, and young David wasn't averse to taking the odd shortcut. The rebuilding costs became excessive, and young David opted for the open wheelers this season with immediate success.
Yes, we had a good weekend last weekend at Surfers Paradise. The car is a lot better to drive than the Ford Laser. Makes it more enjoyable, and I'm having a lot of fun.
They go quick and you don't have much time to make decisions, but you seem to cope better with that in these cars than you did in the Lasers.
Yeah, coping pretty well. I'm still got a lot to learn through what Dad's telling me and that, but I think it's going to be pretty good.
Obviously, you listen to his advice pretty carefully.
Yeah, very carefully.
What about the other 2 boys overseas? Do you, the 3 of you keep in touch and compare notes?
Yeah, we have it's very competitive, our family, and if one gets a win, the others tries to get a win to beat him, so it keeps us on the edge.
Big weekend, not only for you, of course, but for Jeff at Indianapolis.
Yeah, very big weekend for him. Probably the biggest race in the world. They go very quick round there, and hopefully he'll come home with the bacon.
Will you come home with the bacon?
I hope so.
Europe, America, Australia. On the side of Formula 1 cars, in the cockpit at Indianapolis, behind the wheel here at Amaroo. The name Brabham is still a name to watch. Here's Mike Raymond.
Thanks, Walker. Nice little piece there on young Brabham. And we'll be following his progress in this race. They're lined up, ready to get started. Neil, Dave Stanley, pole position.
It's a very healthy-looking field. Let's look at the lineup. Dave Stanley with pole alongside Jeff Walters on the 1st row. The 2nd row, Warwick Brooklyn, David Brabham. The 3rd row, Richard Carter, Gary Jones. The 4th row, Ian Thomas and Andrew Gubb. The 5th, Bruce Constable, Peter Verheyen. And the 6th, Peter Johnston, Steve Juliana. The flag is raised. We're ready for a start, and away they go. Jeff Walters grabs the whole shot. Dave Stanley into 2nd place. That was a tremendous start from Walters. And the Formula Ford field underway for round 2 in the Coca-Cola Bottlers Series. And if it's anything like last weekend's race at Surfers Paradise, we're in for a beauty. Look at Stanley in the new Elwyn having a dash here at the back of Jeffrey Walters. David Brabham into third place. I think it's the Triple M entry of Warwick Rooklyn into fourth place. So Rooklyn's done well. Richard Carter behind him. Stanley on the inside in the gravel. That's not the way to do it. So it's an exciting start to this second round of the series, and Jeff Walters in the Logan Holmes entry off and cleanly running.
Heading down to the late corner. Walters doing it nicely. Stanley still in there keeping the pressure on. And David Brabham 2-3rd after starting out of 4 to the late corner for the first time. Keep in mind, because of the incident earlier today with Bap Romano, all of the races have been shortened, so that is really going to put the pressure on drivers like young Brabham. At this stage, though, Jeff Walters in the Logan Holmes Elwyn, looking pretty sharp, leads from Dave Stanley as they head up Bitchapave Hill again.
And here comes Stanley through. Oh, did he touch? How close was that? Jeff Walters slams the door in David Stanley's face. He's the man who had that pretty horrifying looking crash at Sandown at the hairpin at the end of the back straight and rolled the car. Had his first run in the car again last weekend after that incident. Brabham still in 3rd, but he's got Richard Carter all over the back of him at the moment. Carter, remember, was in 5th place on the grid, so he's moved up very quickly and displacing Warwick Rooklyn along the way.
Maybe the shortening of the races is really spurring on a few of these youngsters.
Added some urgency to things, hasn't it?
Well, it has in Stanley's case, as once again he comes up behind Jeff Walters. Walters in the 2 car, comes out of the late turn. Stanley very close to the concrete wall as they come through Camalco Wonderlic corner. Onto the start-finishing straight. Brabham still running a strong 3rd, and Richard Carter right behind him, heading up Bitchapave again.
Ian Thomas in car 82 also moving up from Queensland. Look at Brabham now. Does he get Stanley? Gee, they're all having a go at the top of the hill today. I don't know about that. It's a difficult place to get through. But Walters, after having had problems last weekend and pulling off the circuit, Gary is looking much better this weekend and very much more competitive in the Logan entry.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, he's been a bit out of luck. We saw him at Surfers Paradise, out of luck and pulling off on the infield and just not entirely competitive. He's been involved in a lot of incidents in racing through the season. It's nice for him, I think, to be up front highballing it along, although he'd rather he didn't have Dave Stanley quite so close.
The funny thing about last weekend was that it was just a coil that fell off the car, and I mean, that's not the sort of thing that normally puts a racing car out of business at a racetrack.
Here's Stanley having a go on the inside.
Gee, I wish they'd stop doing things like that. It's scary, isn't it? Walters gets very close to the Armco. You take a corner off one of these, you know all about it. Look at Brabham. This beautifully prepared Van Diemen from England goes through into 2nd place, past the locally.
Carter making a big move here as well. Brabham has made it now up into 2nd.
There's Rooklyn as well. So the Formula Ford boys, as always, turning it on in style. Richard Carter in the very much older type machine, right in behind Stanley, who's found himself in the wrong spot and gone back into 3rd. And Warwick Rooklyn, of course, the man to watch. He leads the Formula Ford Driver to Europe Series at present. Consistent, hard-running Triple M entry. He's done a great job so far this year. And look at Brabham here as he tries to hold out Stanley. Oh, what braking manoeuvres there from David Brabham.
Coming around with about 1 1/4 laps to run, and it is still Walters. David Brabham in 2nd spot. David Stanley in 3rd. Richard Carter in amongst them as well as they take the signal. The last lap board is out, and Walters will lead them cleanly up the hill. Here's Stanley coming again on the outside, switches back to the other side for a run at David Brabham, and Richard Carter in company with him. To Dunlop Loop. Stanley pressuring all the time. Young lion of the Formula Ford set is young Dave Stanley. Down to Mazda corner. They're closing it up. I don't think Brabham can haul in Jeff Walters. He might have been able to if there'd been another 4 or 5 laps. But they come out of that turn, heading down to the lake for the final time. Brabham warming to the job, though.
The car that Brabham is driving won last year's European Formula Ford Series, so it's a winning car. He's having a big go in the closing stages, but I think Jeffrey Walters will hang on. It's about 2 or 3 car lengths.
A lot of bumping going on between Carter and Stanley in 3rd position.
Oh, the 3rd
last
place
corner,
battle.
though, and Walters will come out across the line. Walters takes it. Brabham will pick up 2nd out of it. Richard Carter will take 3rd, and Warwick Rooklyn will take 4th.
David Stanley, you can see pulling off to the left-hand side of screen. He got tangled up there in the last corner. Don't know what happened, but obviously things didn't work his way. Let's have a look at placings on the Castrol scoreboard for the Coca-Cola Formula Ford. Walters, Brabham, and in 3rd place was Richard Carter.
And welcome back to Amaroo Park Raceway for the final today of the Better Brakes AMSCAR Touring Car Series. 3rd race in the series this afternoon. over 20 laps. Field coming out now. Good to see Gary Wilmington making it back with the Jaguar XJS. And as the field comes out onto the racetrack, let's take a look at the way they'll line up. From pole position is car number 1, Jim Richards, in the JPS BMW. From 2, car 4, John Bowe in the Valvoline Volvo. From 3, 75, Colin Bond. From position 4, 25, Tony Longhurst in the BMW. From 5, 34, Gary Rogers in the BMW. From 6, 28, Tony Cavic in the Commodore. From 7, car 12, Gary Wilmington in the Jag. From 8, 47, Brian Callahan in the Commodore. From position number 9, 77, Peter Williamson in the Toyota. From 10, 19, Ken Matthews, the Commodore. From 11, car number 29, Ken Davidson. From 12, car number 13, Bob Holden in the Toyota. And 2 to round off the 14, 58, David Ratcliffe. And car number 16, Kevin Clark, who had problems earlier this afternoon. So a good-looking field. The big question is whether or not Tony Longhurst will be able to come off the second row over 20 laps and oust his team leader, Jim Richards, and make life very difficult for John Bowe and Colin Bond.
The interesting thing, Mike, is that after the first 2 rounds of the series and the first 2 heats today, Colin Bond leads with 120 points. Tony Longhurst is now in second place with 115. Jim Richards has elevated himself up into third with 110. Gary Rogers in fourth place with 88 points. And then Gary Wilmington has 67 points. And the other good news is that after some problems with the Jag earlier today, in fact, he's had differential problems all weekend in car number 12. Gary Wilmington is back on the grid in the big V12 beast. And there is Jim Richards, the reigning Australian touring car champion in car number 1. The BMW team, should I say, have really found some form again in the last couple of race meetings on the national circuit. And the 635 BM is back in contention. Alongside him, John Bowe in the left-hand drive, car number 4, with 30 seconds to go now before the start of the third and final heat of the AMSCAR Touring Car Series this afternoon. Their newly built engine in this car has put them back in good stead, and there's the real battle at the moment. The men on the second row of the grid, Bond and Longhurst, first and second in the Championship Series, and these cars which battled out in what we call Class A have been having a great dust-up all year.
Flag is up. Racing in the 20-lap final. Johnny Bowe gets off quickly. Richards away slow. And on the outside, Tony Longhurst gathers them up very quickly indeed. Sorts Tony Cavic out on the way through. Bondi can't find gear selection. And Callahan tries to go between the two of them as they go dropping down into the loop.
Actually, Bond's big problem there was Jim Richards got a pretty ordinary start and balked him, so he had to back off and he was engulfed by everybody else. So John Bowe off and clean. He's away. Jim Richards, Tony Longhurst, Tony Cavic came up well in the Commodore, and so too did Brian Callahan. Gary Wilmington, Peter Williamson, then Ken Matthews. So a pretty clean start from all concerned, so Bowe doing very nicely.
John Bowe leads from the JPS BMW teammates, Jimmy Richards in number 1, and of course Tony Longhurst with Colin Bond right behind them. Then a fair gap back to Brian Callahan, doing quite strongly in the Commodore here this afternoon. Coming around for the completion of first of 20 circuits here at Amaroo Park. And as they go across the line, Bowe comfortably clear of Jim Richards, heading up Bitchapave Hill.
Tony Longhurst, though, in third place, is better placed in this race, particularly over the longer distance than he has been in the first 2 races today. And he'll be the man to contend with, I think, as the race unwinds.
Well, his greatest break in this race is the fact that he's got away from Colin Bond, and when he gets locked up in battle with Colin, they tend to get all embroiled in their own little battle, and that doesn't allow Tony to get on with the job. So Tony this time with a bit of fresh air between himself and Colin, and now he gets right into the back of his teammate Jim Richards.
Cavic has got by Callahan too, just behind the leading division.
Oh, was it going tough up at the front with John Bowe? And I tell you what, Jim Richards is all over his back bumper, and Tony Longhurst waiting for a mistake from Jim, and he's ready to sneak through and put a bit of pressure on John Bowe.
The thing about the 325 BMW is that it is very light, easy on brakes, and Tony can drive very deep into corners. The 635 has a little bit more horsepower and therefore pulls away down the straight, but Longhurst makes up an enormous amount of ground when they come through this loop and down through Mazda.
Here they go through the loop now. You could see Longhurst come on very, very strongly, around about half race distance, I would think, particularly if Richards can keep the pressure on John Bowe. Bond is closing up just a little behind Longhurst.
In front of his car looks a little bit out of shape too, Colin Bond's Alpha.
I think he might have nudged Jim when they went away from the line, because Jim certainly got an ordinary start. Yes, you're right, Gary, the front left-hand corner of the Alpha a little worse for wear.
Once again to the late corner.
Top four have opened up a big break now. Tony Cabbage in the Commodore. Gary Wilmington fighting his way through the field in the big Jaguar, followed by Brian Callahan in the Commodore and Peter Williamson in the Toyota Supra.
Isn't that a great shot as they come onto the straight through the Camelco Wunderlich turn? And see how hard and how fast they're driving these cars.
Big disappointment here today in all three races so far for the Better Break Series has been Gary Rogers and the Bob Jane Team Arts entry. Well back in the field.
Well, poor Gary, of course, fighting with a BMW that's not up to par in terms of horsepower. We explained before that he doesn't have all the bits from Germany that he needs to keep the car competitive. He's waiting for those to arrive as soon as the factory can have them ready.
Still qualified pretty well, though, but under race conditions hasn't been able to reproduce that. Tony Cabbage, car 28, the Yellow Pages entry.
There's Gary Wilmington, the little Aussie battler. His friend Noel will be happy. Number 12 going down to the late corner.
Done 2 diffs already this weekend, but he's out there and running in the main event.
There's Cabbage coming into view with Wilmington closing on him.
Great race behind Wilmington too, between Williamson, Supra, Callahan in the Commodore, and Gary Rogers starting to make a move now in his BMW.
Heading up Bitchapave Hill yet again. Wilmington taking the XJS. Be a handful on most Australian circuits. But at Amaroo Park, it's something else.
Wilmington, here's Williamson, Callahan and Rogers.
Brian Callahan just ahead here of Gary Rogers. Brian does only a few meetings a year leading up to the James Hardy. The car was driven at the last meeting here at Amaroo by his Speedway partner, Barry Graham. At the moment, Rogers in the Bob Jane Team Arts BMW going down on the inside of Callahan and moves up one spot in the field.
This car that Rogers is driving is last year's championship-winning car that Jim Richards drove. You'll recall at the start of the year, Rogers was involved with the JPS team when he drove one of their smaller 325 series cars. The car has since been delivered and repainted, and Gary now looks after his own racing operation. And the JPS team have built a new 635 for themselves.
So Rogers presses on in car number 34 with Brian Callahan following him. So let's recap where they're running on the road at the moment. John Bowe still strongly up at the head of the field in the Valvoline Volvo. Right behind him, Jimmy Richards and Tony Longhurst. Heading down to Honda Corner. So as they reel off about 6 laps, the Volvo with Johnny Bowe at the wheel leads from the JPS BMWs of Jim Richards and Tony Longhurst.
Top 3 have got away from Colin Bond, and then there's a fair gap to Cabbage in the Commodore, Wilmington, Williamson, Rogers and Callahan. But it's a battle in 3. It's a battle in 3 between Bowe, Richards and Longhurst. Goes through, but up front it's Johnny Bowe doing it well ahead of Jimmy Richards and Tony Longhurst. Eight laps gone in this race, the final event for today's round of the Better Breaks AMSCAR Series, and there's the leader, John Bowe, the new man for the Volvo dealer team in Australia. And it's time to refresh your memory if you don't already know. 32 years of age from Tasmania, John Bowe. Of course, won the Australian Drivers' Championship 84 and 85. Stats from Digital. And you're going to be seeing a lot more of John Bowe as the season unfolds in Australia.
I'll tell you what, I think Robbie Francevic's going to be seeing more of John Bowe too as the season unfolds. Very, very professional team. All run by John Shepherd.
Volvo, of course, leading the Australian Touring Car Championship. Robbie Francevic, the man, but the Volvo team, the Valvoline Volvo team, very strong this year with 2 equal #1 drivers and very potent machinery.
And the competition quite fierce within the team, I would think.
Probably as fierce within the team as it is outside, I'd say. Oh, and Jim Richards just touching the fence that time through in 2nd place in the BMW 635, 10 laps down now, so half race distance.
And Richards trying very hard at making no impression. It's a little ominous.
I think if you keep in mind that Robbie Francevic was able to win the Australian Touring Car Opener here at Amaroo Park and set quite a good pace, everyone thought that Tony Longhurst and, of course, Jimmy Richards would haul him in.
inside the distance. Richards did that, but of course Longhurst had his tyres go away because he was throwing the car around maybe just a little too much, and that could well have happened here this afternoon. There's young Tony in 25, third on the road, still ahead of Colin Bond, so he's looking good at maybe even squaring the series after today's round.
Things might start closing up here in a minute, Mike, because John Bow's coming up very quickly on a couple of tail-enders. So if he were to get balked even slightly, Jimmy Richards would be right on his hammer again. And, of course, Tony Longhurst lurking in behind the pair of them.
They're coming up, I think, on Bob Holden in the Toyota Sprinter and David Ratcliffe in the Toyota Levin through Dunlop Loop. He'll pick them up on the back side of the course. Down to Mazda Corner. And here they are. They're having their own little race. But, of course, Bob Holden, who has been around racing for 3 decades, he'll be the first to pull out wide and give him a fair run down to the next corner. There's David Ratcliffe coming up on Bob.
Well, Bow's done that pretty easily. Can Jim Richards do the same? So the two Toyotas just in front of him now as he comes down this very short straight. David Ratcliffe drops back a notch.
Well, Jim's going to have to do it in 2 bites. And that's going to allow Bow to extend the lead even further.
To Dunlop Loop again, John Bow, the Valvoline Volvo, number 4, Jimmy Richards in number 1, and Tony Longhurst in 25.
Well, Bob Holden, being a real gentleman on that occasion, went very wide for Richards and allowed him through without any drama. Longhurst getting through pretty cleanly as well. Actually, talking about Longhurst's fine performances this year, he's also up into 3rd in the Australian Touring Car Championship, just behind George Fury. So apart from his very strong showing in the Better Brakes AMSCAR Touring Car Series here at Amaroo, he's actually leading his teammate here, Jim Richards, in the touring car title as well.
Just goes to show what consistency can do for you.
You have to be in it to win it.
Jimmy Richards in car number 1. Let's take a look. 37 years of age, driving for JPS BMW. 2nd in the Amaroo Opener, 6th at Simmons Plains, a non-finish at Sandown, 10th at Adelaide, 4th at Wanneroo, and 3rd at Surfers.
Well, you can see the pattern. It's been improving all the way through the year.
Of course, our digital stats, taking into account the Australian Touring Car Championship performances by Jimmy Richards in 1986. He heads down to Honda Corner again. Tony Longhurst not making any ground on Jim Richards at this stage of the race. And in fact, those 3 are running away from Colin Bond.
14 laps down, 6 to go. I think you're right, Mike. Longhurst, again, by virtue of his flinging this 325 around, has probably heated up the back tyres just a little. And has drifted away from the back of Jim Richards. And there's a great idea of the gaps between all 3 drivers.
Of course, these drivers will contest the next round of the Australian Touring Car Championship 1 week from today at Calder. Let's recap on the Castrol scoreboard. Johnny Bow of Tasmania leads the race. Jimmy Richards running 2nd, and Tony Longhurst is 3rd. Four laps remain in the 20-lapper for the Better Brakes AMSCAR Touring Car Series at Amaroo Park. There's our race leader, John Bow, in the Valvoline Volvo dealer team 240T. And he is going very strongly indeed. Tony Longhurst in 3rd spot, Jim Richards in 2nd, and in fact Longhurst gaining very, very quickly, very rapidly indeed on Jimmy Richards as Johnny Bow, free from any pressure, heads to the top of Bitcher Pave again. And this augurs well, Neil, for Johnny Bow in the remaining rounds of the Touring Car Championship. There's the scrap, as I mentioned before, Tony Longhurst.
Longhurst has made up an enormous amount of ground. I don't know how or where he did it, but he's right on the back of Jim Richards now. So the 2 JPS cars only separated by a couple of metres. And look at Longhurst as he really pushes it all the way up to the reigning Australian Touring Car Champion. And in reference to your previous comment, no doubt about the fact that John Bow is going to be a real force in the closing stages of this year's Touring Car Championship with his fine performance today. And he's gradually been coming to terms with the Volvo. There's Frank Gardner, the man pulling the strings in the JPS team, looking after his boys in 2nd and 3rd at the moment. obviously a little worried because...
Probably concerned if Tony's going for a few more points.
That was my very comment.
They go to the top of Betchapave Hill and drop down into Dunlop Loop.
Frank would be grateful if he can just bring home a couple of straight cars after one weekend's racing. The boys have been run ragged in the last few weekends. There's been so much racing, and of course Tony's been in the thick of many dices. That's not to his detriment. He's been doing a fine job, but often you come out a little battle scarred in those encounters.
You don't need any battle scars with your team partner. That brings upon the wrath of the team manager. 1 1/4 laps remaining in this afternoon's 20-lap final. The third round of the Better Breaks AMSCAR. John Bow of Tasmania in the Valvoline Volvo, still the race leader. Jimmy Richards here in second. And, of course, third is Tony Longhurst. Across the strike. 1 lap remains. And Johnny Bow doing it very, very comfortably indeed.
Well, he should take out the individual round here today. And now get some points on the board for his overall score, but not contesting the first couple of rounds will put him out of contention for an overall win. But the Volvo dealer team using this weekend as a fine-tuning exercise to get this car competitive once more. It's the one we've spoken about a number of times in our telecasts around Australia. It's done some miles, this warhorse. And John Bow, of course, after having done very little driving in sedan-type cars, spending most of his time in open wheelers, had to first of all come to terms with the right-hand drive Volvo and then the left-hand drive, so it was no easy task.
He's done it well, though.
He has.
Coming along to the short Camalco Wonderlic straight for the final time, coming out of the last turn. Checkered flag at the ready, and Tasmania's John Bow strikes a #1 today in the Better Breaks AMSCAR Touring Car round. Second spot is going to go to the JPS #1 driver, Jimmy Richards. And third place will go to Tony Longhurst in the BMW 325. Fourth spot going to Colin Bond. Here's recapping the placings for you on the Castrol scoreboard. Johnny Bow, the race winner. Jim Richards takes second. Tony Longhurst takes third. And a great drive this afternoon from Johnny Bow. Now that they've sorted out the car, I would think that he will be very competitive for the next round of the Australian Touring Car Championship, which will be held at Melbourne's new look Calder Park Raceway a week from today. And of course, you'll be able to see that exclusively on 7 Sport. Round 7, the Scalder from Calder, Sunday, June 1st. Join us at 1 o'clock through 4. Actually, the round last year was the best race of the Australian Touring Car Championship Series. And there's no reason to suggest that this year's race won't be exactly the same. So Johnny Bow in car #4 will be joined next week by Robbie Francevic. Peter Brock, of course, will be back with the Mobile Commodore. So too will Johnny Harvey. Dick Johnson joins the circus again. And, of course, the Nissan Skylines of George Fury and young Glenn Seaton. They had some problems at Surface Paradise a week ago for domestic racing here. The next major meeting in the Sydney area will, of course, be on Sunday, June the 8th at Amaroo Park Raceway. That's the big reverse direction race. And our next telecast, of course, following Calder, will be the 8th round of the title from Lakeside, one of our favourite circuits in Queensland, on Sunday, June 15th. Live and exclusive, of course, to 7 Sport. John Bow has come back to victory lane. And I would think John Shepherd would be delighted with his performance here this afternoon at Amaroo.
Yes, a great performance from John Bow, and one that he will savour for a long time. His first win ever in the Volvo. He's taken a pole position in the car, but to actually knock up a win is a very important thing in a race driver's career, particularly in a new team. So we look forward to seeing him next weekend.
So they're the placings for today's AMSCAR Touring Car Series. The Valvoline victor is Johnny Bow in car #4. Second place goes to Jimmy Richards in car #1. Third place, of course, to Tony Longhurst in #25, and fourth to Colin Bond in the Ignis Alpha #75. We trust you've enjoyed our telecast today of the Better Breaks AMSCAR Touring Car Series from Amaroo Park Raceway. Problems, of course, during the middle of the afternoon with that unfortunate accident to Bap Romano. Pleased to report he's well on the mend in hospital. We look forward to your company a week from today when we go touring car racing, the National Championship Round 7 from Calder Park. Bye until then.